Chapter 1202. Each subworld must have its own administrator. For example, in this subworld there was Area 003. Since there was a serial number, the other subworlds naturally had other numbered area. The administration of each subworld was very responsible in cultivating its own hotbed, waiting for it to evolve to the extent that it met the requirements. In order to cultivate the most perfect subworld, different subworlds would go through many restarts and openings, trying out different evolutionary paths. For the sake of their independence, there was naturally an insurmountable barrier between different subworlds. It was just that in the entire huge system, there were subsystems in it, so it was impossible for them to be perfect without loopholes. For example, there would be creatures whose individual ability exceeded the upper limit set by the subworld, like the Transcendents or similar existences. The Transcendents could infiltrate into different subworlds through the dimensional cracks, using a special infiltration ability unique to the dimensional crack. In addition, to let creatures that exceeded the upper limit of other subworlds infiltrate into other subworlds, they could only arrive by force, or obtain the recognition of multiple subworlds, and be able to arrive by praising their name in multiple subworlds, or they could sneak in through the dimensional cracks of the subworlds. The owner of the haunted house obviously came by way of sneaking in, and the time of sneaking in was surprisingly caused by a small episode that happened at the airport when Boss Luo took a plane back from South America. At that time, because of a special item, the special ability of the Eye of Horus ring, it caused a temporary spacetime disorder, and that was the root cause of it. Originally, number 003 Area had already begun to correct the disorder at the beginning. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to give the stowaway enough time to sneak in. It was just that Boss Luo's interest was piqued at that time, and number 003 Area's obedience was beyond his imagination. He forcibly delayed for some time, and only then did the stowaway have enough time to split a trace of consciousness and sneak in. Boss Luo easily knew the cause and effect. Well, that was all. Anyway, there were already Transcendents in this subworld, so it didn't matter if there was one more or one less. However, it would appear that even after all this time, those living beings still haven't given up on exploring. As they chatted, the two of them found a quiet teahouse and sat down. After ordering some snacks, the servant girl carefully smeared butter on the bread ordered by the boss and said slowly, "The source of time and space is still too attractive to them." Luochio asked softly, "Have you explored it as well?" Yu Yi knew that her master was asking about the things that happened before she became a maid in the club, so she nodded. There was a time. Luochio nodded and immediately asked, "Are you also curious about the origin of space-time?" Miss Maid said softly, "Exploration is generally done because of his instructions, and partly because of one's own interests. But what?" Yu Yi looked at Luochio and said softly, "I've found my destination." The two looked at each other and smiled. Their feelings were slowly growing and growing. At this time, a car stopped opposite the teahouse. A middle-aged man with a tired look hurried out of the car. He then walked into a restaurant. It was Zhou Yuxing. The next moment, Chen Mingming also got out of another online car and walked in. Luochio glanced at it casually, and the topic about the subworld stopped. "Master, are you interested in Chen Mingming?" Miss Maid easily caught Luochio's attention at this time. Luochio thought for a while and said, "This person is a bit like me in the past. The club for me is like the silver pistol for Chen Mingming. He didn't choose to use it for himself, but gave it away. Don't you think such a move is more interesting?" "Master wants to use it for yourself?" Miss Maid vaguely felt something. "Let's wait and see." Luochio smiled slightly. After transforming Nero last time, there are still some source of foreign body left. I can't just leave so many critical gates and not use them. Zhou Yuxing added sugar cubes one after another into the coffee. It was already the fifth one. Too sweet is not good for the liver. Chen Mingming, who was sitting opposite, suddenly said. This made Zhou Yuxing, who was stirring the coffee, stop. Since they sat down, the father and son had not spoken. Hearing Chen Mingming's words, Zhou Yuxing was somewhat happy, but at the same time, the guilt in his heart became more and more intense. He knew that he really owed this child too much over the years. Especially in the past 3 or 4 years, his emotions were even more explosive. He was only willing to bury himself in work, which led to the complete breakdown of his family. At this point, Zhou Yuxing was also sad in his heart. He didn't know when Chen Mingming's character became introverted. It was probably because he often quarreled with his wife. "Waiter, give me a new cup of coffee." Zhou Yuxing pushed the coffee with 5 cubes of sugar to the side and ordered another one. "Your complexion looks better." Chen Mingming looked at Zhou Yuxing and said, "It seems to be to break the deadlock at this time." Zhou Yuxing secretly felt ashamed. He was not young anymore, but he couldn't be as calm and composed as his son. Zhou Yuxing nodded. "You also know that I have had headaches for the past few years. I haven't been able to treat it well or sleep well. But the day before yesterday, your Uncle Gao sent me some new spirit concentrating medicine. I took a few pieces and felt much better. This new medicine is quite useful, better than before." This. Chen Mingming lowered his head, as if thinking about something, and then said, "Teacher Gao asked for leave and hasn't come to school these few days." Zhou Yuxing said, "He said that he wants to travel for a period of time to relax and broaden his horizons. He probably won't come back in a short time. In fact, your Uncle Gao also values you very much and wants to cultivate you. With his cultivation, your development may not necessarily be worse than overseas." All these years. Chen Mingming raised his head, looked at Zhou Yuxing, and slowly said, "You have devoted almost all your time to work, I know. I know that I was only focused on work and neglected all of you. But I will change." Zhou Yuxing directly interrupted Chen Mingming. "I feel much calmer these 2 days. When I calm down and think about it carefully, I feel like I have gone mad." Chen Mingming shook his head and interrupted Zhou Yuxing. He suddenly said, "Can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." Zhou Yuxing nodded heavily. "If I were an unpardonable criminal, would you arrest me personally?" Chen Mingming asked calmly. Zhou Yuxing immediately frowned. He could only be considered to have calmed down a little these few days, but his emotions were still easily agitated. He suddenly slammed the table, and there was a hint of anger in his voice. "What nonsense are you talking about? I can calmly discuss this question with Teacher Gao." Chen Mingming sighed and said faintly, "Can't you give me an answer? How can I be the same as Gao Wen?" Zhou Yuxing said, "I am your father. I hope you can give me an answer before next Wednesday," Chen Mingming said softly. Next Wednesday. This was the exact time Zhou Yuxing knew that his ex-wife and son would go abroad. Zhou Yuxing was stunned. He suddenly felt that he had never really understood his own son. He didn't even know what his son was thinking at this moment. A trace of sadness emerged. He looked at the calm Chen Mingming and moved his lips, but he couldn't say anything. "I'll wait for your answer." Chen Mingming stood up, nodded slightly to Zhou Yuxing, and left alone under the surprised gazes of the people in the restaurant. Only Zhou Yuxing was left sitting there alone, smoking fiercely. "There are still 3 left to be investigated. I should be able to finish the investigation in the afternoon." With a trace of fatigue, Wei Zidao and Lu Mingho returned to the office in this city. Just as they entered the door, an abnormally tall figure blocked their way. Moreover, this frighteningly strong fellow was missing an arm, which made the 2 of them a little surprised. "Are you 2 Intermediate Agent Lu Mingho and Junior Agent Wei Zidao?" At the same time, a man who was much shorter and had the word "spirit" written all over his face jumped into the duo's line of sight. "Junior Agent Bu Bu Gao of the administration, reporting." Lu Mingho was stunned, then nodded and introduced himself, but at the same time, he felt a little strange. Why was there a new agent here? Although there were some obstacles in this investigation, he didn't apply for backup. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a new agent here. Comrade Bubugao, why are you here? Wei Zidao asked directly. The overly spirited young agent Bubugao suddenly smiled and said, "It's like this. Because I participated in the Mount Tai incident and performed outstandingly, the organization specially assigned me to a new place to take up a permanent post." And Lu Mingho had a big question mark. Bubugao quickly ran to the coffee table and came over with 2 gift boxes. "I passed by here and saw the mission information. I know that the 2 of you are temporarily on a business trip here, so I came over to say hello and get to know each other. After all, there will be opportunities to work together in the future, and I also want to get to know Senior." The overly energetic guy even had a hint of flattery in his voice. Lu Mingho looked inside and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The administration was a place that spoke based on strength. It was rare to see such a guy who spent so much effort to get along. But it was good to have someone flatter him. Besides, one wouldn't hit a smiling person. "You're too kind." Lu Mingho laughed, "but forget about the gift. The administration has rules that we can't accept gift. You should return it. Senior, you're really law-abiding, a role model for our generation." Bubugao suddenly had a look of admiration. This guy was probably born in the old officialdom, so he must be very successful, right? Lu Mingho shook his head inwardly and immediately looked at the one-armed man standing behind Bubugao. He frowned. "Who is he?" Bubugao quickly said, "Oh, he's called Wang Hu. He's a South China tiger demon. After I influenced him, I recruited him as my exclusive logistics support and took up the post with me." Lu Mingho nodded and didn't pay too much attention to Wang Hu's matter. Not to mention the logistics staff, among the official investigators, there were also investigators who served the demon race, and some were even high-level. As for the logistics staff, there were also some weak demons who would be recruited. Generally, the demons who served as logistics staff were generally weaker, or their abilities were more suitable for support, or they were oppressed by other powerful demons and sought protection from the administration. This Wang Hu had a broken arm, so he was probably the type who was seeking protection from his enemies, right? After all, with the administration's reputation, the demon race would more or less have scruples. But to be subdued by Bubugao, even though he was a tiger, his strength must be limited, right? After all, no matter how Lu Mingho looked at it, this Bubugao was a rookie. At this time, Bubugao gently nudged Wang Hu with his elbow, and the dull Wang Hu seemed to have remembered something. Wang Hu greets the 2 sirs. "Sirs," Lu Mingho shook his head, and his evaluation of Bubugao suddenly dropped a lot, so he waved his hand and said, "Okay, it's enough that you've met, there's no need to be so polite. There are many demons who serve in the administration, as long as you know your place, we won't make things difficult for you." Bubugao nudged Wang Hu with his elbow again, and Wang Hu slowly said, "You're right, sir." Lu Mingho, who didn't know that this might be the peak of his life, said impatiently, "That's it, we've met. I still have something to do, so I won't talk about it. Help yourselves." After saying that, Lu Mingho took Wei Zidao directly into an office that was temporarily vacated. Bubugao blinked, holding 2 boxes of gifts, and suddenly frowned. It shouldn't be. Didn't they say that paying respects and giving gifts can make the superiors happy, and that if you're a little sweeter, you'll be appreciated? Aya, are they the type who eat porridge every meal without fail? The puzzled Bubugao stared at Wang Hu, and then said angrily, "It must be because of your dumb look." "Me?" Wang Hu pointed at himself. "What does it have to do with me?" "Soul," Bubugao said seriously. "Your performance lacks soul, and has no emotions. Listen, when you speak, you have to inject your soul into it, so that people can feel your sincerity." Bubugao sighed. After spending some time together, he was already used to Wang Hu, this blockhead. He didn't expect anything. At this time, Wang Hu looked out the window, pointed in the direction of an industrial park, and suddenly said, There's a strong demon aura over there. Bubugao didn't care and said casually, "This is the private land of the Shinryu in Kelowna. There's nothing strange about encountering demons just by walking around the streets." Wang Hu said, "I feel that the owner of this demon aura can fight with me for a while." Bubugao immediately rolled his eyes. This guy said that he didn't like to fight, but on the way here, this guy would kick every demon he met, and almost trample them to death with just a few kicks. He even said that it was a friendly match. Don't mess around. Bubugao lowered his voice and said, "If other cities fight, then so be it. At most, we'll just leave. This is Lord Long's territory. Didn't you see that the administration doesn't even dare to station people here? Even if something happens, at most, they'll just transfer people from other places for a casual visit." At this time, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao came out of the office again, and put on their coat. It looked like they were planning to go out again. Bubugao felt that his performance just now wasn't good enough. He couldn't show that he was a promising newcomer, so he went up to them on the spot. "Seniors, are you going out?" "You haven't left yet." Lu Mingho frowned and said casually, "We still have a case. We really don't have time to greet you. Please forgive us." "Senior," Bubugao said enthusiastically, "I just saw you frowning when you came back. You must have encountered some problems. How about this? Anyway, I still have a lot of time to take office, and I have nothing to do now. Why don't you let me help, gain experience, and learn?" "You?" Wei Zidao opened his mouth. Bubugao nodded immediately, eager to try. He pulled Wang Hu, pointed and said, "Us." Lu Mingho pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, you follow us for the time being." Chapter 1203. Fatty. Zhao Lu, who was wiping the sweat off Zhang Xiaoqin's face, was stunned and stopped. The siblings had spent a lot of time communicating during this period of time, so naturally they talked about a lot of things. After the accident, Zhang Xiaoqin had always been silent, but now, as if she had been reborn, she became much more cheerful. "Yeah, brother, don't you remember?" Zhang Xiaoqin flicked Zhao Li's forehead. "Didn't you often go to Fatty's house to play PS2? I have some impression, but I don't remember." Zhao Lu shook his head and asked curiously, "Why did you suddenly mention him?" "I'll beat you with 8 gods. Bulsh *t. I haven't used Terry yet. Look at me, Wu by Shur 4 style, a divine dust. Take my heaven and earth brilliant tyrannical fist. Ha, 38 combo. You lost. Let's do it again." While speaking, Zhao Lu vaguely remembered a round face. It was almost 13 or 14 years old. At that time, the siblings' parents were not divorced yet. They were still living on the streets of the lower town. There was a chubby kid in the neighbor's house. He was easily bullied because he liked to cry. Zhang Xiaoqin smiled and said, "Nothing, I seem to have seen Fatty's mother today. She changed a lot and I almost couldn't recognize her. Maybe I got the wrong person?" Here? Zhao Lu was stunned. He remembered his sister said that she met an old colleague and gave him 500 yuan. It was strange to meet people she knew in such a rehabilitation center. "She probably came to see a doctor?" Zhang Xiaoqin said casually. "She entered a doctor's room and didn't come out for a while. I was thinking about whether to say hello, but I thought better of it." Zhao Lu nodded. Zhang Xiaoqin was a person with strong self-esteem. If she was sympathized with because of her current state, she would feel bad. At the same time, she didn't want to trouble others. After taking care of Zhang Xiaoqin, Zhao Lu left in a hurry. There was only one class in the afternoon, and it was the second half of the class. Tomorrow was Zhang Xiaoqin's birthday, so he planned to go to the mall to get her birthday gift before class. Of course, before that, he would go home and put down his lunchbox and other things. After leaving the treatment room, Zhao Lu hurried to the entrance of the center. "That's settled then. I'll pick you up at the airport tonight." A woman's voice rang in Zhao Li's ears. He subconsciously turned his head to take a look. In an office next to him, there was a woman with a smile on her face, walking out like a spring breeze. She seemed to have taken good care of herself. Perhaps she looked a few years younger than her actual age. Through the crack in the door, she could see a young and handsome doctor sitting inside. Although he was called a doctor, he was actually just a physical therapist. Zhao Lu, who had some guesses about the relationship between the two, did not pay too much attention to it. Looking at this woman's face, he vaguely had an impression of her. Thinking of his sister's words, he thought that this could be little Fatty's mother. If that was the case, then she was really much younger than she actually looked. Is she really little Fatty's mother? Zhao Lu was stunned, then shook his head. He didn't think too much about it and quickly left. He still had to rush home. After the woman closed the door, she glanced at the young man who passed by and frowned. This child, I seem to have seen him somewhere. After returning home, he washed his things. When he was about to go out, his phone received a message. After Zhao Lu glanced at it, his face changed slightly. Zhao Lu sat on his sofa for a while, then suddenly gritted his teeth and ran into the room. He took down the box on the wardrobe, then took out the things inside and stuffed them into his school bag. A silver pistol? Bu Gao stopped in his tracks. This was just the beginning. They hadn't found one of the remaining 3 targets yet. Before this, Bu Gao had already learned about what had happened from Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao. Bu Gao's identity could be verified, and his ID was real. The equipment he carried from the administration also had a serial number. Lu Mingho did not intend to hide anything from his colleagues in the administration. Originally, the exchange of information between the agents was not a big deal. With Bu Gao's authority, he could also know this. Of course, some confidential things would not be revealed. Now, several of them were waiting for the target to appear. But Wang Hu was also here. Wang Hu's giant-like body and the appearance of a broken arm were very eye-catching. Looking at this man whose muscles were like steel, it was hard for passers-by to imagine what kind of accident would cause him to lose an arm. Although Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao were also curious, they did not deliberately inquire about Wang Hu's privacy. They just casually asked about Wang Hu's origin. Regarding Wang Hu's origin, Bu Gao had already made sufficient preparations. In fact, he didn't know where Wang Hu came from. He only knew that this big guy had forgotten the past and didn't know how his arm was broken. But Wang Hu's explosive strength also made Bu Gao feel like he had picked up a treasure. This guy was dull and easy to talk to. Although he didn't know when he would suddenly wake up, if he let such a big fool wander outside and join some bad group, it would cause more trouble. Of course, Bu Gao had some selfish motive. After all, with such a strong big fool, it would be much more convenient for him to deal with things when he took office in a place in the future. As a weakling who had just made his debut, when facing some old demons in the deep mountains, with Wang Hu by his side, he was naturally confident. Therefore, after almost selling his body and accompanying some old leftover woman in the archives of the headquarters for a few days, Bu Gao finally figured out the problem of Wang Hu's identity. Of course, because of the Mount Tai incident, many people died, and now the headquarters was in a mess. They had no time to care about a small logistics support personnel's information. Coincidentally, Wang Hu had an extra identity file in the administration. Wang Hu, race, South China tiger, became a demon 60 years ago, nascent stage, gentle personality, loyal and honest. At this time, when Lu Mingho asked, he naturally answered smoothly without any problems. As for Wang Hu, he had been strongly requested by Bu Gao not to release his demon aura casually. Needless to say, after his request, this big fool really restrained his demon aura. Once he restrained it, he actually didn't release any demon aura at all. Bu Gao couldn't help but be amazed. Although this big fool was stupid, his ability was really good. Maybe it's some kind of magical artifact with special ability. Lu Mingho said simply, killing a rapist is not a big deal. But the second case is simply a downtown killing. It's too blatant. No matter what's behind it, this person's identity still needs to be investigated. Bu Bugao nodded solemnly, but in his heart, he was already very happy. He didn't expect that before he officially took office in the local area, he would encounter a problem that even a mid-level agent would find difficult. If he could help in this matter, wouldn't the organization's evaluation of him in the future rise? Therefore, the person who aspired to become the section chief of the administration broke out with unprecedented enthusiasm at this time. "Senior, this target looks like he hasn't come out for a long time. How about this? I'll think of a way to lure him out." Bu Bugao hurriedly volunteered. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao looked at each other, then smiled and nodded, happy to enjoy the results. After seeing Bu Bugao take Wang Hu into an office building, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao began to chat. "Brother Hao, if there are no clues for the last three people, we're going to walk into a dead end again," Wei Zidao said worriedly. "Yes." Lu Mingho nodded. "We've already captured the aura of the people who went to the alley before. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any omissions. And Qian Er's confession has already proved that such a person exists, unless this person also has the ability to erase his own aura." Wei Zidao had a different opinion. He suddenly said, "Brother Hao, actually, I still have some reservations about that kid that day." "You mean, the young man protected by the witch of Hai Dongqing?" Lu Mingho frowned. Wei Zidao nodded. "Yes, you see, when we just put him down and were about to interrogate him, this witch of Hai Dongqing suddenly appeared like a guardian. Don't you think it's still a bit strange?" Lu Mingho pondered and said, "It's indeed a bit. It's too much of a coincidence to say it's a coincidence. It's just that the identity of the witch of Hai Dongqing is too sensitive. We can't make direct contact." As he spoke, Lu Mingho directly looked at the Bagua mirror in his hand. There were only 4 light spots left on it. 3 of them had not been investigated yet. As for the 4th one, which was Chen Mingming's light spot, because they didn't really interrogate him at that time, Lu Mingho subconsciously didn't erase it and kept it. The location was clear. "Brother Hao, if the remaining 3 people have no problems, why don't we try to figure out this guy who was protected by the witch of Hai Dongqing?" Wei Zidao suggested in a low voice. After thinking about it again and again, Lu Mingho nodded and agreed. At the same time, he diverted some of his attention to look at the door of the office. To be able to achieve such a level of skill, of course, he had to train himself by slacking off at work for a long time. Xiao Bao couldn't help but admire his own strength. When he really reached the position of Master Bao in the bureau, he probably wouldn't have to worry about life and death like this anymore. The moment these words appeared on the interface, Xiao Bao immediately switched the interface back to the office mode. At the same time, a woman with a beautiful figure and a cold expression slowly walked in. "Section Chief Nan." Xiao Bao hurriedly stood up and greeted her. Nan Xiaonan looked at Xiao Bao and frowned. Then she nodded and said indifferently, "Prepare some things for me, I'm going to prepare for the autopsy." "Is it the deceased Hai Daguet from this morning?" Xiao Bao asked subconsciously. Nan Xiaonan shook her head and said, "It's the deceased Chang Xiao and the suspect who died before." Xiao Bao was stunned. But Section Chief Nan, didn't Bureau Chief Lu say that their case has been taken over by someone else? And I've done a check before, but I didn't find anything special, except that I don't know how the bullet disappeared. I've got the approval, you can go and prepare." Nan Xiaonan raised a document in her hand, and then turned around and walked out after finishing her words. Regarding the case of Chang Xiao and the suspect, Bureau Chief Lu didn't want anyone to ask about it. Even Sir Ma came back with a face full of dust and was depressed for a long time. Forensic Nan had just been here for 2 days and she had already gotten the approval? So awesome! Xiao Bao couldn't help but admire her. Although this new female forensic doctor looked cold and unapproachable, her work attitude was very admirable. She had only been here for 2 days, but she had already completed a lot of work. The bodies of the deceased Wang Liang and Wu Rong, Wu Rong's body was sent back, and Hai Daguet's body in the morning. If Chang Xiao and the suspects' bodies were added, it would be 5 times. 5 times in 2 days. Nan Xiaonan put on her gloves and looked at the tools that Xiao Bao was preparing. At the same time, her eyes fell on the 2 bodies side by side on the operating table. Her pupils contracted slightly. She thought to herself, Wu Rong and Wang Liang's bodies, although the way of killing seems to be cruel, it's clean and neat. There shouldn't be much blood spilled when the bodies were dismembered. The murderer should be very familiar with the structure of the human body. The incisions are also very smooth. The murderer doesn't seem to be killing for revenge. In addition, the murder scene is highly tidy. Hai Dagui didn't have any external injuries. He did hang himself, but I can feel a residual aura in his body, and it's extremely evil. It seems to be the interference and control of consciousness. Next are the bodies of Chang Xiao and the suspect. The bullet disappeared due to physical strength, and the murder scene doesn't have the conditions to open fire. Chang Xiao and the suspect's deaths, as well as Hai Dagui's, are related? While she was thinking to herself, Section Chief Nan. Section Chief Nan. Are you ready, Section Chief Nan? Got it, let's eat. Nan Xiaonan nodded. Let's start with the suspect first. Eat? Start? Xiao Bao was stunned, and then he shook his head. He must have misheard. As she spoke, Nan Xiaonan walked to the suspect's body. There were several stitches on the body. Obviously, Xiao Bao had checked them before. Nan Xiaonan didn't look at the wounds that had been cut open. Instead, she directly held up the head of the deceased, bent down, and stared at the wound on the forehead that had been cleaned, a small bullet hole. At this moment, Nan Xiaonan's eyes suddenly shrank. What's going on? Hai Dagui has extraordinary power, but it's only the power of evil. It's similar to curses or black magic. But why is there a trace of the power of the law left in this wound? She suddenly put down the suspect's head and turned to look at Chang Xiao's head. She did the same thing, touching the head with both hands. Then, her lips, which were hidden under the mask, opened slightly. Her expression was solemn. It's still the law. In the afternoon, the sky was gloomy, as if it was going to rain. Although it was the beginning of spring, the weather was still a little cold. The weather in the south was very humid. Now, when the cold wind blew, it was even colder. Chapter 1204. In the autopsy room, Xiao Bao blinked and looked curiously at Nan Xiaonan's autopsy work. Generally speaking, along with the autopsy process, the results of the autopsy should be mentioned so that it was convenient to record. However, Nan Xiaonan didn't say a single word. This caused Xiao Bao, who was like a pen and paper, to not be able to write even a single word. It's done. Nan Xiaonan suddenly stopped. You can put the body back. Xiao Bao was stunned. It's done? He did not record anything? Nan Xiaonan took off her gloves and mask, and after inadvertently wiping her lips with the back of her hand, she walked out of the autopsy room without saying a word. Nan Xiaonan, who ignored Xiao Bao who was in a mess in the cold air, walked to the office alone. She actually had other thoughts in her mind. Absorbing the remaining energy on Hai Dagui's body allowed me to recover about 0.003 units of power. It's useless. But if I can absorb the remaining power of the laws on Wang Liang and Wu Rong, it's just that with my current ability, I can't absorb it at all. Soon, the remaining laws will dissipate. What a pity. So, there really is an eternal sovereign in this subworld who understands the power of the laws. At that time, I was fighting with a few enemies in the rift. Unfortunately, I had to draw out the power of the origin to resist the erosion of the origin of the dimensional rift, causing this subworld to suddenly become damaged. I only took a quick look at the rift, and only felt that there were several powerful auras in this subworld. Later, when I checked my consciousness fell again, it was the same for my enemies. At this time, the suppression of the world's will on transcendence is terrifying. It is probably not easy for my consciousness to recover to the level of my original body. The world's barrier has been repaired, and my original body is naturally unwilling to pay a huge price to descend. It should directly give up and focus more on dealing with the enemies in the rift. I'm afraid that the consciousnesses of my enemies who have fallen here have also suffered the same fate, so I'm not afraid. What I am afraid of is something else. At that time, I was fighting with a few enemies, and it seems that two-dimensional voyagers of unknown strength had also passed by. They probably released their consciousness to check this place and fell here like me. Right now, he's probably worrying about how to break through the restraints of the subworld, right? Nan Xiaonan had already returned to her office. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat down. She quickly adapted to the development of this world's civilization. After all, in her previous world, although magic had completely replaced science, there were still some people who couldn't use magic and insisted on walking the path of science. Although they hadn't developed to the level of modern civilization, they had already developed the so-called difference engine. I've fought with those enemies for countless years, and I know them very well. Even if we all fall here at the same time, the situation on both sides is still at the same level, so there's nothing to be afraid of. However, if these enemies were to find the two undying beings and join forces to deal with me, the situation would be dangerous. I have to find these two unexpected wills as soon as possible and see if there's a possibility of them joining forces. Also, the natives of this subworld seem to have quite a few experts. Perhaps I can make use of them. Nan Xiaonan slowly blew on the coffee, waiting for the temperature to be right before she drank it. As for the warmth from holding the cup with both hands, Nan Xiaonan showed an expression of enjoyment. Even so, she could not help feeling a little gloomy. Had she ever been so weak? The subworld's rejection of foreign wills is too frightening. I can only choose to fuse with the soul of the natives of this subworld to be allowed to exist, or my consciousness would definitely be obliterated, but that way, the soul of the natives would affect me. Fortunately, it's not much. Nan Xiaonan, this identity would make it easier for me to move around in society. Still, the atmosphere in this city is chaotic, and there are many transcendents. Although there are differences in strength, the powerful one could directly threaten my true form, but it suddenly left a few days ago for some reason. Now, I have to be careful of the other darkness. Yes, darkness. That day, the entire hemisphere was shrouded in a terrible darkness. Even her true form, which had walked the path of immortality for countless years, could only tremble in the instant of that darkness, let alone her current weak self. This was also the reason why she didn't dare to make too many big movements. Lying low was the only thing she could do right now, because she didn't know if the great existence behind the darkness had already noticed her arrival or not. Therefore, she did not dare to wantonly use secret techniques to recover her strength. Otherwise, there were many individuals known as monsters in this city, which were very suitable for her to recover her strength. She had to be careful. When she went to check the corpse in the morning, she felt a trace of power left in Hai Dague's body, and was naturally a little excited to hunt. She could not help but laugh bitterly. It's said that subworlds with higher numbers are more dangerous. So it's true. Nan Xiaonan weakly rubbed between her eyebrows and took a sip of coffee. Her tongue was instantly scalded. It's so hot. Before the class started, Zhao Lu walked into the classroom with a heavy heart. This was not a public class, so all the students were in the same class. Naturally, he did not meet Dong Xiaofeng and the others. But he still habitually sat near Chen Mingming, just in the row in front of Chen Mingming. There were not many students in the class, and some students directly did not come. Probably because the teacher would not take attendance in this class, so even though the class had officially started, the classroom was still relatively empty. The dull teaching began, and many students were sleepy. Zhao Lu seemed to be a little absent-minded. He lowered his head and put his hands under the desk. The expression in his eyes kept changing. Suddenly, Zhao Lu felt that his shoulder was patted. This sudden pat made Zhao Li's reaction abnormally big, as if he was startled. He abruptly turned around. the person sitting behind him was naturally Chen Mingming. Zhao Lu seemed to be relieved. What? Chen Mingming was expressionless. He just glanced at Zhao Lu and then looked at the ground, saying indifferently, "You dropped something." It was just a ballpoint pen that fell on the ground. Zhao Lu quickly picked it up. "Thank you. Are you okay?" Chen Mingming asked casually. Zhao Lu quickly shook his head, but the mobile phone in the drawer suddenly rang. Zhao Lu gritted his teeth and grabbed his school bag. I have something to do, help me ask for leave." After saying that, Zhao Lu carried his school bag and hurriedly walked out of the classroom from the back door. Chen Mingming frowned and seemed to be lost in thought. "What's the matter with that student, does anyone know?" The teacher on the podium obviously noticed this scene and immediately asked with displeasure. He could tolerate the low attendance rate, but he directly left in the middle of the class. This was intolerable. At this time, Chen Mingming slowly stood up. "I'll go and have a look." The teacher frowned, but Chen Mingming directly walked out of the classroom without waiting for his permission. This was intolerable. The teacher slammed the podium and was about to reprimand these lazy students when suddenly there was a plop. At this time, in the front row of the classroom, a girl unexpectedly fell down without warning and directly fell to the ground. The students around her suddenly screamed and the silent classroom suddenly became chaotic. "All I did was hit the podium, and he fainted from fright?" Looking at the girl who was being helped up and didn't wake up, the teacher looked at his palm in a daze. But he didn't know that at this time, a crow that had stopped at an unknown time opened its wings and slowly flew away. Finally, the crow flew to the rooftop of the teaching building and finally landed on the shoulder of a young man with a haggard face, slightly bowed, and messy hair. At this time, the young man seemed to be sneering. "Just because of a disagreement, you can let your good friend sleep forever. It seems that no matter which world you are in, once a woman holds a grudge, it is very scary. So, idiot 24, you haven't found a girlfriend until now?" The crow suddenly spoke human language. The young man scratched his hair and didn't get angry when he heard this. After yawning, he said in boredom, "Why didn't I bring anything and only brought a beast like you here?" Shaking his head, the young man casually grabbed the crow from his shoulder. "I can't earn much from this commission. Let's settle the other commission. Speaking of which, it's really convenient. Things like mobile phones can increase the number of customers all of a sudden. And there's also a person here." With that, the young man threw out the crow in his hand. The moment the crow was thrown out, its body turned into a black shadow. Its body expanded several times, and then its hands directly grabbed the young man's shoulder. With a flap of its wings, the giant crow flew out with the young man's body. Unexpectedly, just as it flew out of the rooftop guardrail, the shadow crow's body shook for a while and instantly returned to its original size. "Oh no! I forgot that my power hasn't recovered. Hatchy 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 hatchy." The phone's voice was very loud. It seemed to be a line used by a character in a certain game. Dong Xiaofeng was expressionless. He lowered his head and played the game on his phone. He didn't have to go to class. Because no matter what the results were, when he needed to graduate, he would naturally graduate. Because it was a Friday afternoon, there were many families visiting Huxin Park in the middle of the city, which was formed by several high schools. Suddenly, a football fell from the sky and hit Dong Xiaofeng's hands. "Brother, I'm sorry." A man in his early 30s ran over at this time. At the same time, he looked at the mobile phone that was knocked to the ground by the football. His heart could not help but thump. He recognized this phone. The lowest specs cost at least 7,000 to 8,000 yuan. He couldn't help but look at the young man in front of him, and a bad feeling grew stronger. With a height of 1.8 meters and a strong physique, the man felt like he was a skinny monkey in comparison. In addition, this young man's eyes gave people a feeling of hostility, as if they were filled with anger all the time. Dad, behind the man, the boy who was only a few years old seemed to be a little scared. At this time, He hid behind his father and grabbed his father's pant. "Little brother, I didn't do it on purpose. Look, if this phone is broken, can I take it to repair it?" The man braced himself and said. He saw Dong Xiaofeng suddenly bend down, but instead of picking up the mobile phone, he picked up the football. He came in front of the father and son, squatted down, and handed the football in his hand to the child. His eyes were still a little scary. The little boy was startled and a little scared, but he still took the football. "Little brother?" The man was a little uncertain about this scary young man and called out hesitantly. Only then did Dong Xiaofeng pick up the phone. After casually glancing at it, he turned back and said indifferently, "Go and accompany your son. It's okay." Thank you." The man took his child and thanked him, then quickly left. Dong Xiaofeng watched the father and son walk away, then he lay on the lawn expressionlessly and continued to play his game. At this time, someone trotted towards him. "Young Master Feng. Young Master Feng. So you are here. I thought you ran to the lounge of the stadium again." The person who came was one of Dong Xiaofeng's teammates, Zhen. "What's the matter?" Dong Xiaofeng simply stopped playing the game, sat down and asked casually, "Where is Chang? Why is he not with you?" "I don't know." Zhen shrugged and said, "He has been acting strangely since he came today. Just now, he secretly ran to the new teaching building. I don't know what he wants to do." "New teaching building?" Dong Xiaofeng frowned. That building had not been built yet and was still under construction. But Dong Xiaofeng did not care too much. "Young Master Feng, it's a little boring. Why don't you play with that coward?" Zhen suggested at this time. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly said, "These 2 days you have had a lot of fun, right?" "It's okay," Zhen said with a smile of exultation. "Every time I see this coward's look of being angry but not daring to speak, it's so cool. I was wondering if I should play something more exciting." "Young Master Feng, you are right. It's really interesting to keep those photos and videos and play slowly." "Give me your phone," Dong Xiaofeng suddenly said. "Okay." "Young Master Feng, what are you doing?" Zhen could not help but be stunned. He saw that Dong Xiaofeng's gaze was as cold as the December wind, causing him to shiver involuntarily. Just like that, he broke his phone and threw it directly into the lake in front of him. "Young Master Feng, my phone? You are not allowed to touch it in the future," Dong Xiaofeng said coldly. "Scram." "Young Master Feng, what did I do wrong?" I said. "Scram. Do you want me to stand up and say it?" "Don't." Mingzhen hurriedly got up. He was extremely displeased, but he did not dare to show it. He could only leave dejectedly. After that, Dong Xiaofeng lay down again. After a while, he raised his phone and opened the social media app. "Don't go to class, come to the school gate, I'll take you somewhere." After a while, "What are you trying to do? One wants me to go to the new teaching building, the other wants me to go to the school gate. Enough. I won't obey you anymore. You should all receive punishment." New teaching building? Chapter 1205. Chen Mingming walked in the corridor unhurriedly. The class was on the 7th floor of the teaching building. He saw Zhao Lu walking towards the elevator. He looked down and saw Zhao Lu walking out of the teaching building. When he came to the elevator door, he saw a woman unexpectedly. "You are," Chen Mingming couldn't help but stare at the blonde woman with blue eyes. She was like a perfect work of art. She was from that place, the servant of the man who sold him the pistol. "Mr. Chen, are you free? My master wants to have a talk with you." At this time, Chen Mingming looked at the servant girl in front of him with surprise. Last time, he tried to see if he could see the boss. But this time, the boss took the initiative to find him. This made Chen Mingming a little confused. The servant girl smiled and seemed to be waiting for Chen Mingming's response. Chen Mingming had to nod. Obviously, he couldn't resist the mysterious power even if he wanted to. "Where is he? Please follow me." The servant girl waved her hand, and the elevator door behind her opened automatically. Chen Mingming walked in directly with a calm face. The servant girl walked into the elevator and praised, "Mr. Chen is really a calm person." Chen Mingming said indifferently, "Maybe I'm just a little slow, or I'm not good at expressing my emotions." The servant girl chuckled, "Even your heartbeat is very calm." Chen Mingming didn't say anything. The elevator soon stopped running. When the door opened, Chen Mingming didn't see the first floor of the teaching building, but the lobby of the shop he went to before. Chen Mingming liked the atmosphere in this shop very much. It was as if he had found a quiet place in a busy city. Of course, in terms of quietness, it was naturally not as quiet as the gushi in the old building deep in the mountains. However, it did not have the mood of quietness in the midst of activity. This was the impression this shop gave him. He couldn't help but yearn for it. "What's the matter?" Chen Mingming sat down and frowned, which was rare for him. Luo Qiu put down the black teacup in his hand and said with a smile, "Do you remember the bet I mentioned last time?" Chen Mingming nodded. At this moment, Boss Luo waved his hand. Beside the two of them, a light screen that was as tall as a person rose up. The light screen gradually changed, and finally, a 4K image quality scene appeared. "This is Zhao Le?" Chen Mingming frowned. Through this miraculous light screen, he was able to see Zhao Li's every move. "A bet," Boss Luo said softly. "Mr. Chen's friend should be the one with the highest chance of shooting. This is a rare opportunity. Mr. Chen, are you sure you don't want to play a game with me?" Chen Mingming was silent for a while before he slowly said, "I'm not betting. If Mr. Chen wins, I'll give you 50 years of life. What do you think?" Luoqiu looked at Chen Mingming and smiled. "I think Mr. Chen needs it." Chen Mingming sighed and said seriously, "I'm too far away from you. I can't think of anything that you want from me. You're the one who started the bet, and you said you'll only choose the other side. That is to say, no matter which side I choose, you'll win. The condition seems attractive, but it's just a trap. You can give me my life in the blink of an eye, and if I lose, the contract will end." Boss Luo didn't say anything, but the servant girl said indifferently, "Mr. Chen, with my master's identity, of course, he won't interfere with the uncertainty of such a small bet." Chen Mingming lowered his head and didn't say anything. Luoqiu said, "In this case, let's wait for the result. What do you think, Mr. Chen?" Chen Mingming nodded and then looked at the light screen. This guy was called Xiang Chang, who was usually called a Chang. He was always following Dong Xiaofeng. Zhao Le looked at this guy silently. On the way to class, he received a message from Xiang Chang, so he had to run out in a hurry. Finally, he met Xiang Chang at the agreed place, but this guy didn't say anything, and took him all the way to the newly built teaching building and walked in. At this time, Zhao Lu received another message from Dong Xiaofeng, asking him to wait for him at the school gate. This made Zhao Lu almost collapse, knowing that these guys threatened him with those dirty things, and didn't intend to let him go at all. "Where are you taking me?" Zhao Lu stopped and roared at Xiang Chang, who was walking in front of him. Xiang Chang slowly turned around at this moment, and his expression seemed strange. He didn't look at Zhao Lu, but looked around the construction site and suddenly said, "Do you know why no one is working here today?" Zhao Lu was agitated and said angrily, "How would I know? The boss in charge of this project is dead." Xiang Chang said indifferently, "He committed suicide. The contractor died, so the workers naturally stopped working, so no one came here." Zhao Lu frowned. "What does this have to do with me?" "It doesn't matter." Xiang Chang shook his head. "But it has to do with me. Do you know? This project originally belonged to my family, but that damn guy used despicable means to rob it. My family was waiting for this project to save our lives, but in the end..." Zhao Lu was stunned. Unexpectedly, Xiang Chang's expression changed several times at this time, and finally seemed to make up his mind. He suddenly rushed forward and kicked Zhao Lu on the stomach. Zhao Lu was not a person good at sports, and his physique was far less than Xiang Chang's. He fell to the ground in pain. He didn't have time to react, and his body on the ground was directly pressed by Xiang Chang. After that, Xiang Chang's fist hit his face again and again. Dong Xiaofeng had also hit him once, but he had always hit his shoulder or back. He had almost never hit those places that were really painful or obvious. Zhao Lu didn't understand why Xiang Chang went crazy at this time, and had to instinctively protect his face. "You're crazy," Zhao Lu said painfully, but Xiang Chang suddenly stopped waving his fist. Zhao Lu looked at Xiang Chang's face through his legs, and suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Xiang Chang's face was ferocious at this time, like a devil. Not only that, Xiang Chang's hand was holding a strange dagger, which seemed to have some strange patterns. Zhao Lu didn't have time to look at it carefully, but he knew that Xiang Chang was obviously going to stab him with the dagger at this time. Zhao Li's face suddenly changed dramatically. In panic, his survival instinct made him burst out far more than his usual strength, and he twisted his body. The dagger suddenly missed, but it also directly pierced Zhao Li's shoulder. Zhao Lu was in pain, struggled to resist, and finally kicked Xiang Chang away. After breaking free, Zhao Lu scrambled to his feet and grabbed his bloody shoulder. "You're crazy!" After being pushed away, Xiang Chang not only didn't wake up, but also became more serious, like a crazy man. "A life for a life. I just tried it, I didn't expect it to be true. Zhao Lu, you coward, die for me!" At this time, Xiang Chang was holding the dagger and crazily rushing at him. But at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from behind Zhao Lu. The figure stretched out his hand and hit Xiang Chang's chest. Like a railing, Xiang Chang crashed into the arm and was directly knocked to the ground. Zhao Li's eyes widened in disbelief. Dong Xiaofeng? At this time, Dong Xiaofeng was slightly panting at this time, and his forehead was full of fine sweat, as if he had rushed all the way here. Dong Xiaofeng turned back at this time, and fiercely looked at Zhao Lu. This beast-like gaze subconsciously made Zhao Lu feel cold all over. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng stepped on Xiang Chang's wrist, which was holding the dagger, and said angrily, "Are you King crazy? Young Master Feng." Being glared at by Dong Xiaofeng's fierce eyes, Xiang Chang seemed to be awake for a moment and suddenly panicked. "Young Master Feng, don't block me. I don't want to die. If I don't kill him, I will die." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Dong Xiaofeng snorted. "You idiot, are you taking drugs to your brain again? I told you not to take drugs, but you didn't listen. You don't understand. Xiang Chang crazily said at this time. "You don't understand. If you don't let me kill him, I will kill you. It's the same as killing you." "You." In a hurry, Xiang Chang's left hand suddenly grabbed the dagger in his right hand, and fiercely slashed at Dong Xiaofeng. Dong Xiaofeng's motor nerves were very developed, and at this time, his foot that was stepping on Xiang Chang's right hand suddenly pulled back. A cold light flashed, and a wound of more than 10 centimeters long was cut on Dong Xiaofeng's calf. This pain made Dong Xiaofeng instantly break out in a cold sweat, and suddenly knelt on the ground. This time, his heel was cut. At this time, Xiang Chang stabbed at him again, and Dong Xiaofeng was quick-witted. He grabbed a handful of cement dust from the ground, and suddenly sprinkled it. Xiang Chang's eyes were suddenly cut by the cement dust, and he screamed in pain. He crazily waved the dagger in his hand, which was very scary. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng endured the pain and reluctantly stood up, only to feel a sharp pain coming from the cut on his heel. However, he was a person who did not admit defeat. At this time, he clenched his teeth, and suddenly rushed at Xiang Chang, pushing him to the ground, and pressed down on Xiang Chang's body. However, Xiang Chang was completely crazy, and even with the strength that Dong Xiaofeng usually trained, he was still somewhat unable to suppress Xiang Chang. He raised his head and looked at the pale Zhao Lu, who was also covering the wound on his shoulder, and roared in a low voice, "What are you doing? come and help. Although he did not know what happened to Xiang Chang, Zhao Lu could not help but hesitate at this time. He looked at Dong Xiaofeng, who was almost using all his strength to suppress Xiang Chang, and also looked at Xiang Chang, who was crazily struggling, and his eyes slightly shrank. Xiang Chang suddenly went crazy, although he did not know the reason, but he went crazy. He held a dagger in his hand, and had already cut Dong Xiaofeng's body. If, thinking of the things that he held in Dong Xiaofeng's hand, Zhao Li's breathing suddenly became rapid, perhaps he did not need to use the silver pistol at all. Come here, bastard! Zhao Lu took a deep breath at this time, shook his head, and stepped back 2 steps, saying indifferently, "You 2 dogs fight each other, what does it have to do with me?" Dong Xiaofeng's pupils suddenly shrank. Zhao Lu at this time turned around and staggered away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. At this time, Xiang Chang had directly bitten his arm. He had actually bitten off a piece of his flesh. This pain directly surpassed the wound on his leg, and Dong Xiaofeng almost fainted. His hands subconsciously loosened, and Xiang Chang stabbed his abdomen. Dong Xiaofeng saw stars and cold sweat. At this time, Xiang Chang directly sat on his body. Dong Xiaofeng saw the madness and bloodthirst in Xiang Chang's eyes, and watched the dagger fiercely stabbing at his heart. He could not help but reveal a trace of despair. At this time, bang! A brick fiercely hit Xiang Chang's face, and Xiang Chang seemed to have directly knocked out. Xiang Chang directly fell on Dong Xiaofeng's body. Looking at the dagger inserted next to his cheek, Dong Xiaofeng's heart beat wildly. Only then did he see Zhao Lu with a ferocious face and a brick in his hand. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng pushed Xiang Chang away forcefully. Seeing that Xiang Chang's chest was undulating, he wanted to get up. Although the wound on his heel was painful and bleeding, the stab wound on his abdomen was more serious. Of course, he wanted to save himself. Unexpectedly, Zhao Lu suddenly rushed at him, and pressed Dong Xiaofeng to the ground again. Zhao Lu suddenly grabbed Dong Xiaofeng's neck, and his eyes were still ferocious. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng calmed down. The pain made him twitch more or less, but at this time, he still spoke calmly. "Didn't you leave me to die? Why did you come back? Do you want to kill me with your own hands? Dong Xiaofeng, you king beast. You want to revenge? Sure." Dong Xiaofeng's face was pale, but he chuckled. "According to the amount of blood loss, even if you don't help me, I won't be able to hold on for long. I suggest that you better leave here and get rid of the relationship as much as possible. Don't you want revenge? Then don't get yourself involved. You think I don't dare?" Dong Xiaofeng didn't speak, but closed his eyes, because of the dizziness caused by excessive blood loss. But the hands on his neck slowly loosened. Dong Xiaofeng subconsciously opened his eyes, but he saw that Zhao Lu was pressing the wound on his abdomen with both hands. You don't want to kill me?" Zhao Lu said coldly. "Do you really think I will do such a self-destructive thing? Even if I have 10 million reasons to kill you, even if I really want to kill you all, even if I have prepared everything, I won't do it in the end. I still have a family to take care of. I can't let my sister, who has just recovered, fall into a miserable life, just for revenge." Family. Dong Xiaofeng's heart trembled. "Listen." Zhao Lu stared fiercely at Dong Xiaofeng, while picking up his phone to call for help. He said coldly, "If you still have a little conscience, if you still know how to be grateful, then don't trouble me in the future. I'm not saving you, I'm just saving myself. I promise you." Dong Xiaofeng said faintly, then his pupils suddenly shrank, and his face changed dramatically. He suddenly reached out with one hand to push Zhao Lu away. At the same time, a dagger missed Zhao Li's body and fiercely stabbed into Dong Xiaofeng's chest. Xiang Chang, who should have been lying on the ground, was now emitting a black gas. Chapter 1206. The sudden change caught Zhao Lu off guard. However, Xiang Chang's current appearance made Zhao Lu suck in a cold breath. Looking at the black gas coming out of Xiang Chang's body, his melting face, and that strange smile, Zhao Lu was so scared that his whole body became weak. At this moment, the dagger pierced Dong Xiaofeng's chest. He saw that Dong Xiaofeng had completely fainted, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Zhao Lu grabbed his school bag in horror and put his hand into the school bag. But at this time, Xiang Chang's hands let go of the dagger, stood up, and muttered to himself, "I don't have to die, I don't have to die. Someone replaced me, someone replaced me. Ah!" At this time, he fell to the ground in pain, grabbed his face that was beginning to rot, and made a sound, which gradually changed from a human voice to an ear-piercing beast-like sound. "Save! Save me! Save me!" Xiang Chang painfully stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to grab something. "I have already done it." "Why?" "Why, because the time has passed." Suddenly, a long voice sounded. At the construction site, a man who seemed to be unable to straighten his back, with a pale and haggard face, and a crow on his shoulder, slowly walked over. Although his appearance was strange, this man seemed to have a few leaves on his body. Zhao Lu looked at the strange man in bewilderment, and subconsciously moved back. At this time, the crow suddenly flew out from the mysterious man's shoulder, and then stopped on Xiang Chang's body, and directly pecked on Xiang Chang's forehead. The crow seemed to have taken out something, and then directly swallowed it, and then slowly flew back to the mysterious man's side. After that, the man looked at Dong Xiaofeng, who still had a dagger in his chest, bent down, and directly pulled out the dagger, and seemed to be a little regretful. "This is difficult. Why didn't you complete the replacement before the time was up? This vitality is much stronger. It's a pity that you didn't succeed. You, who are you?" Zhao Lu said in horror. Facing such a strange thing, he really couldn't keep calm. "Sorry, I scared you." At this time, the young man scratched his head, walked a few steps forward, looked at Zhao Lu and said, "I am 24, a death curse master. If there's anyone you don't like, you can look for me. It's cheap and good, and you don't have to worry about it. But it's best to remember to pay the bill after you're done. Don't forget the time like this customer. Otherwise, you've seen the consequences." "You don't come over." Zhao Lu retreated even more fearfully. The young man shook his head and ignored Zhao Lu. Instead, he walked to Xiang Chang's side. At this time, Xiang Chang's originally rotten body was strangely carbonized. He was still holding out his hand to ask for help. His eyes were bulging out of their sockets, and his death was abnormally horrifying. At this moment, the young man muttered to himself, "Now that we're poor, let's not waste it. Why don't we make them ghost servants?" As if he wanted to do something, the young man crouched down and pointed his finger at Xiang Chang's chest. Immediately, with Xiang Chang's corpse as the center, a 3-meter-wide blood-red ring emerged from the floor. The center of the ring seemed to be stained with flowing blood as it gradually filled up. One after another, ancient and strange symbols floated and then began to climb up Xiang Chang's body. However, right at this moment, a fireball suddenly shot over from the front. The young man didn't move, but the crow on his shoulder suddenly flew out and turned into a shadow, directly blocking the fireball. After that, the shadow turned back into a crow and fell on the young man's shoulder again. The young man frowned and stood up, only to see that there were 4 men in front of him. 3 of them were wearing black suits, and one of them had a broken arm. At the same time, they were the ones who gave the young man the most terrifying feeling. These were the members of the Administrative Bureau's team. "Tell us your identity and cooperate with our work. You've violated the extraordinary prohibition regulations." One of them opened his ID card at this time, and at the same time, held up a special revolver that could shoot Taoist bullets, and shouted coldly. Bu Bugao nervously looked at Wei Zidao, who was holding a Taoist gun at this time, and secretly wiped his sweat. In fact, except for that time on Mount Tai, this was his second real mission, and he faced a criminal directly. Originally, he volunteered to investigate, but in the end, He investigated 3 guys in a row, and found nothing. In the end, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao discussed and felt that they should investigate Chen Mingming again, since they didn't really investigate him before, and directly rushed to the University of Political Science and Law. Originally, they should have stayed in the school. The bright spot on the 8 trigrams mirror had been shining. Unexpectedly, when they arrived, the bright spot suddenly disappeared. The last place where it disappeared was this school. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao naturally felt that things were strange, so they started to search this school. They didn't expect to encounter a disgusting, extraordinary crime during this search. At the moment when they arrived, they only saw this mysterious young man, in a strange way, seemed to be doing something. Next to him, there was a young man lying in a pool of blood. A young man was terrified, and there was a horrible corpse lying on the ground. How could he remain calm? Wei Zidao directly shot a bullet at him. Facing the menacing temporary group of 4 from the administration, the young man scratched his head awkwardly. Extraordinary prohibition regulations. What is this? Wei Zidao snorted coldly. Give up resistance, go back with us, and tell us the truth. The young man frowned and said, You guys, I don't have any grudges with you, right? I just came to settle the bill. This one lying on the ground has nothing to do with me. As for this corpse, it's because I wanted to go back on my words and was punished. Lu Mingho frowned, thinking that this guy didn't seem to know anything about the administration. He tilted his head and looked at Wei Zidao, saying quickly, Take him under control first. Understood. Wei Zidao nodded, then put away the documents and directly rushed to the young man with a gun. Looking at Wei Zidao rushing over, the young man calmly jumped back a few steps, and at the same time, the crow on his shoulder flew out again, turning into a dark shadow, directly blocking in front of Wei Zidao. This dark shadow was also strange. It could stretch, shrink, and even turn into a fist, changing its posture freely, and its power wasn't weak. It could easily punch a huge fist mark on the ground. Taking advantage of this gap, Lu Mingho quickly rushed to the front of Dong Xiaofeng and began to check Dong Xiaofeng's injuries. Zhao Lu gritted his teeth, but still braced himself and ran up. He felt that these men in black could take him down. He looked at Lu Mingho's hands pressing a few times on Dong Xiaofeng's body, and then looked at Dong Xiaofeng's unconscious and painful appearance. His heart trembled, thinking that this guy pushed Xiang Chang away to save him. He couldn't help but have some complicated feelings. How is he? Zhao Lu asked carefully. He won't die. Lu Mingho didn't look up, but opened his suitcase with a hiss, took out bottles and jars from it, and applied some ointment to Dong Xiaofeng's wound. The wound that was bleeding magically stopped at this time. Zhao Lu was amazed, but Lu Mingho raised his head and shouted at this time, Bu Bugao, come and protect him. Hearing this, Bu Bugao immediately stepped forward, recalling the school's handling of this situation with a smile on his face. Don't worry, brother, your friend is fine. You will be fine too. I will protect you. Zhao Lu nodded subconsciously. At this time, Wei Zidao was caught in a bitter battle with the shadow, constantly dodging, and it was difficult to get close to the mysterious young man. He couldn't help but shout, The opponent is stronger, requesting permission to use intermediate Taoist bullets. Use approved. After getting Lu Mingho's authorization, Wei Zidao's face suddenly lit up with joy. He looked at the constantly changing shadows and sneered. He quickly removed the remaining 3 bullets in the revolver and then directly replaced it with a new bullet. He raised his hand and fired. The power between the primary bullet and the intermediate bullet was very different. Both of them had the power of intermediate Taoist magic arts, and above sealed. Of course, this was not comparable to the powerful high-level Taoist magic arts bullets consumed by the administration on the top of Mount Tai that day. That level of bullets would not be casually given to agents to use in the city, unless there was a particularly dangerous situation. But after that, it was necessary to write a report for an internal investigation. At this time, a bullet was directly shot at the shadow, and at the same time, the place where the shadow was shot exploded instantly. The shadow directly exploded, creating a huge gap. Wei Zidao shot 2 more times in succession. The power of the second explosion directly shattered the shadow, and finally fell to the ground like a rag, but these shadows quickly gathered again, and turned back into crows, and staggered back to the young man's side. Surrender! Wei Zidao pointed the gun at the young man. Give up resistance. The young man was not in a hurry, and looked at the pistol in Wei Zidao's hand curiously. Hey, I didn't expect to develop such an interesting prop here. The principle seems to be different from mine. Cut the crap. I'll say it again, give up resistance. Wei Zidao shouted loudly. The young man shook his head, and suddenly reached out his hand. His hand suddenly disappeared, as if it had reached into another space. The young man slowly pulled his hand out of this strange space. After that, the young man held a silver short gun that looked like an ancient short fire system. He smiled and said, I also have this thing, but I don't know if it's more powerful than yours. He was also interested in this prop, and thought that since he came to this subworld, he did not have a good contact with the transcendence in this world, and it was difficult to estimate the development of the transcendence in this world, so he planned to have a good test today. Silver gun. But at this time, Bu Gao suddenly pointed at the young man. Senior, silver gun. Is this the murderer you are looking for? It's really silver. Wei Zidao's eyes suddenly shrank at this time. Hearing Wei Zidao's exclamation, Zhao Lu was startled, and remembered that he also had a silver gun in his school bag, and then his breathing became rapid. But it seemed that they did not notice him. Lu Mingho also frowned, and said in a low voice, Your Excellency, are you the real murderer of these recent murders? The young man could not help but be stunned, but he remembered that during this period of time, he did accept the commission of customers and cursed 1 or 2 humans to death, so he shrugged and said, I'm just doing it for money. It's really you. Wei Zidao snorted, and pulled the trigger again, and a bullet was shot out. The young man's bent waist suddenly straightened, and he dodged the attack with a strange speed, and at the same time, he quickly shot out 3 black light balls with the silver short gun in his hand. These light balls were strange. Although their speed was fast, it was far slower than the speed of bullets, but they rushed to Wei Zidao's side in an instant. Wei Zidao was shocked, but he let these 3 black light balls attach to his body, and then the light balls split open, and black shadow vines instantly entangled him firmly. Wei Zidao suddenly fell to the ground, and lost the ability to live. Then the young man attacked again with the silver short gun, 10 shots in a row. These 10 spears were different from the black balls of light from before. What shot out was actually a black wind. This black wind was like the face of a malicious spirit. As it rushed forward, it let out an ear-piercing shriek, which was incomparably strange. Seeing this, Lu Mingho quickly waved the metal rod and hit one of the black winds, but it did not disperse at once. At the same time, Bu Gao hurriedly began to take out his equipment. His equipment was obviously complete, but between using the metal rod and the Taoist pistol, he suddenly fell into a dilemma. But the black wind had already rushed in front of him, and Bu Gao suddenly screamed. Suddenly, a huge figure blocked in front of him, and waved its hand to slap away the black wind directly. Wang Hu! Bu Gao shouted happily. He had chosen to bring this blockhead along with him. He was so King witty. N. Wang Hu nodded woodenly. Bu Gao saw the opportunity to make a contribution at this time, and quickly said, Go and help Senior Lu and the others. Okay. Wang Hu nodded again, then stepped out, and his figure disappeared instantly. At the same time, the black winds disappeared one by one, and Wang Hu's speed was like teleportation to Bu Gao. Finally, Wang Hu came to Wei Zidao's side, and directly tore off the black tentacles wrapped around Wei Zidao's body. So strong. Lu Mingho was stunned at this moment. On the side, the young man obviously also noticed Wang Hu. Looking at the brawny man with a broken arm who easily broke his curse, he could not help but be amazed. Wang Hu. Kick him! Bu Gao shouted excitedly at this time. I allow you to step on people. Just don't step on them to death. Okay. Wang Hu nodded. When the young man heard this, he was stunned, then sneered, and reached out again to take out the same silver short gun from the strange space. At this moment, he held the silver short gun in both hands, but there was a crazy aura of disdain for the world. Unexpectedly, before the short gun could shoot out the curse, the young man felt a terrifying force imprinted on his chest. The brawny man with a broken arm in front of him was actually faster, and directly flashed in front of him, and kicked out without saying anything. There was no time to dodge. Bang! The young man's body flew out in an instant, and directly hit the wall. He felt that a few of his ribs were broken. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said sadly, "What's the situation?" Chapter 12:07. The young man's body soon fell from the wall, and he spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. He couldn't remember the last time he spat out blood, but he vaguely remembered that in a time and space long ago, there seemed to be a pretty girl who played a joke on him. He got used to it after spitting it out. I'm really not used to it. The young man took a deep breath, but his broken ribs seemed to have pierced into his lungs, and this action instantly caused his whole body to almost spasm in pain. Wang Hu walked directly in front of the young man, and his huge shadow was enough to directly cover the young man. You're too weak. The young man moved his lips. The last time this sentence appeared in his mind was almost as long as the time when he spat out blood. I didn't expect there to be a warrior with such a good physique. The young man coughed out another mouthful of blood. But the eyes hidden under his bangs suddenly emitted a ray of cold light, and at the same time, a dark shadow quickly rushed towards Wang Hu from the side. At this time, Wang Hu still had a dull look on his face, but his arm swung out without warning and directly scattered the dark shadow. Looking at Wang Hu, who was in a daze at this moment, but his casual moves were so accurate and domineering. The 2 completely different feelings seemed to be misplaced, but they existed at the same time. The corner of the young man's eyes couldn't help but twitch. Where did this monster come from? While Wang Hu displayed his invincible power and directly kicked the mysterious young man to the point that he couldn't fight back, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao naturally didn't stay idle. Although they had doubts about Wang Hu's combat strength, at this time, the first thing to do was to directly control this mysterious young man. The 2 quickly took out the tools developed by the administration to catch transcendence and directly rushed over. Unexpectedly, the young man suddenly bit his palm, and blood immediately gushed out. The moment his blood fell to the ground, it merged into the floor. In an instant, the floor suddenly seemed to melt and actually began to churn, turning into a waterbed, making it difficult to maintain balance. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao instantly lost their balance and fell to the ground. Wang Hu, on the other hand, was towering and unmoving like a mountain, but subconsciously frowned. He subconsciously clenched his fist, but suddenly released it, and the huge demonic power had hibernated before it could burst out of his body, and just stepped out. With this stomp, the entire new teaching building under construction instantly shook violently. The layers of lime were shaken off crazily, but they didn't damage the foundation of the building. At the same time, they broke through the strange phenomenon in the surroundings. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao fell to the ground. They thought that they had fallen into a swamp, but when they woke up, they realized that they were only sitting on the ground. However, the mysterious young man had already disappeared. Bu Gao rushed forward, grabbed Wang Hu's arm and asked, "Where's the prisoner?" Wang Hu looked confused. Then, he shook his head. Not to mention the current Wang Hu, even if he was in his normal state, he would still be puzzled. This was because the methods used by this young man were very strange. It was as different as heaven and earth from the Kelowna Taoist sect. Seeing that Wang Hu did not know how the criminal disappeared, Bu Bugao could not help but feel a little disappointed. At this time, Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao's expressions were not very good. After all, that young man looked like he was seriously injured, but they still let him escape in the end. Fortunately, the appearance of this mysterious young man had been secretly recorded, and the next step was to issue the warrant. Of course, before that, they needed to know more about this mysterious young man. Dong Xiaofeng was unconscious, and only Zhao Lu was left at the scene. Everyone couldn't help but look at Zhao Lu. I'm not very sure either. This person said that his name is 24. Zhao Lu was very nervous. Even if the man who claimed to be Lu Mingho had already treated his injuries, he was still frightened by the scene of the agency agents fighting with the mysterious young man. Vaguely, Zhao Lu heard from a few words that they were tracking down the mysterious man with the silver pistol. Zhao Lu was somewhat aware that the silver pistol that these people from the agency were really tracking was the one that he hid in his bag. It was just that the mysterious 24 was innocently implicated. But at this time, how could Zhao Lu confess the truth to Lu Mingho and the others? He subconsciously wanted to keep this matter to himself so that Lu Mingho and the others would not notice anything. Therefore, he was very cooperative with the other party's inquiry. He immediately told the reason why he came to this place, but omitted the matter of being threatened. Bu Bugao was holding a small notebook, recording what Zhao Lu said, and asked more about Zhao Li's background in detail. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao listened on the side and did not stop Bu Bugao's investigation. Anyway, these things were what they had to do. Bu Bugao volunteered himself, which was naturally what they wanted. According to Zhao Li's description, this guy who claimed to be 24 seemed to have accepted Xiang Chang's commission to kill a boss who contracted the entire building project. Wei Zidao began to analyze. Lu Mingho was also thinking, but he thought more than Wei Zidao. For example, Wang Hu's matter. It was just that he intended to train Wei Zidao, a junior, at this time, so he did not interrupt. Xiang Chang probably wanted to go back on his word after the event, or to protect himself. He intended to kill either Zhao Lu or Dong Xiaofeng to replace himself. Wei Zidao said solemnly at this time, although Dong Xiaofeng's wound has been treated, there is still a strange energy left in his body. Maybe we can use this strange energy to track 24's whereabouts. Wei Zidao looked at Lu Mingho and said, in addition, Zhao Lu is also an insider of this matter. May 24th not necessarily not look for him. If that's the case, Brother Hao, I think we shouldn't let Zhao Lu take the fragment withdrawal for now. Lu Mingho nodded, indeed. But it's not good to stay here for a long time. Let's take Zhao Lu and Dong Xiaofeng back first. Wei Zidao nodded, turned and walked to Bu Bugao's side. Therefore, in a situation where Zhao Lu was extremely uneasy, he had to leave with this group of people. The light curtain that was comparable to 4K picture quality was frozen at this time. Not to mention Chen Mingming's appearance at this time, our boss Luo had a strange expression on his face. This expression appeared after seeing the mysterious young man 24 took out the silver short rifle. Even Luoqiu couldn't help but sigh when encountering such a coincidence. It seemed that there was really such a profession that would inexplicably become a scapegoat. Chen Mingming finally retracted his gaze at this time and slowly sighed, looking at Luoqiu. He was a person who was used to thinking, but he couldn't figure out the intention of this mysterious boss. Did he invite him here just to watch this scene? Wait, why did he regard it as a performance instead of what really happened? Chen Mingming couldn't help but fall into contemplation. Luoqiu didn't disturb Chen Mingming's silence at this time. He was quite patient, so he sat quietly at this time. He knew that Chen Mingming would speak first, because Chen Mingming had more questions in his heart. Finally, Chen Mingming slowly sighed, raised his head and said indifferently, "He didn't shoot. It is unlikely that he will use this gun in the future." Luoqiu smiled slightly. "This actually depends on your wish, whether he will use it or not, and also depends on the extent of the person who gave it to him." Chen Mingming frowned. Luoqiu said slowly. First of all, when you gave the gun to Zhao Lu, you didn't explain too much about this gun, you only explained how to use it. Think about it, how can a person who has always been a modern scientific person believe in the ability of this gun at the first moment? His first feeling towards this gun was not surprise, but fear. What do you think he is afraid of? Chen Mingming muttered, he is afraid of guns. Luoqiu nodded. That's right, a law-abiding person will naturally feel fear when facing a weapon that is banned by society. However, it was clear that he was more concerned about the identity of the person who had delivered the gun to him. What he is afraid of is the intention behind it. Chen Mingming nodded. He had also considered this point, so Zhao Lu had not used this gun, which was also within his expectations. Luoqiu smiled. If you want to let others use this gun, first of all, you need to make them believe that this is a magical spearhead. Of course, your actions are not wrong. The characteristics of this gun are destined to have perfect concealment even if it kills people. The concealment of the gun is perfect, but the person who uses it is not perfect. If you are only willing to stay behind the scenes, you naturally can't come out to make contact with others, which will inevitably reduce the credibility. But if you show up or even talk to the other party face to face, and gain the other party's trust, you will definitely appear in this relationship. Chen Mingming shook his head. I am not you, I don't have your ability to appear and disappear unpredictably. In fact, the key is in the information. Luoqiu smiled. The use of information can allow you to freely manipulate even if you don't appear in this relationship, even if you are just an ordinary person. Information? Chen Mingming was startled. He suddenly had a strange feeling. He felt that such a conversation was like a kind of teaching. Information about people. Luoqiu nodded. Let's assume that the ability of this gun has been exposed, but you haven't. For example, there have been more than a few people who have died because of this gun. When people know this information, the credibility of this gun will naturally be higher when it appears again. Chen Mingming nodded. He was a smart person. With just a little explanation, he was able to understand the method. Indeed, if there were a few more victims, and the circumstances of the victims' deaths were known to the world, or even a step further and let the world know of the existence of such a gun, when he gave it out again, perhaps the person holding the gun would be able to accept it very quickly. They might even be unable to resist experimenting. Naturally, they would know the ability of the gun through experimentation. The key was information. Chen Mingming subconsciously looked at the light screen beside him. At this time, he still felt that it was unreal. Just like this, he sat in this quiet place and easily knew what was happening outside. He believed that this method was the real concealment, without any trace like God's vision. Be good at observation. Luoqiu smiled slightly at this time and waved his hand. Not just observe a certain person, but everyone, every aspect, every moment, even everyone. Along with Boss Luo's voice, pieces of light screens began to appear in front of Chen Mingming. They were like countless lenses, like windows that kept popping up in a computer, and on each window, something was happening. Distant, near, public, secret, from top to bottom, from bottom to top, sad, happy, angry, happy. Between people, no matter how big or small the matter was. At this moment, an unprecedented sense of impact made it difficult for Chen Mingming to maintain his usual calmness. He seemed to have turned into a pair of eyes that were everywhere, overlooking all living beings. Just like a few minutes ago, he and Luoqiu were watching everything that happened in the teaching building together. From Xiang Chang's madness to the appearance of 24, then the agency's reckless advance, followed by the confrontation between the two sides, their dialogue, their behavior, and everything about them were all in a panoramic view. In fact, there were no secrets anymore. In fact, they were facing the truth all the time. This was a wonderful feeling. A feeling of being able to control everything was vaguely fascinating. After a long time, Chen Mingming woke up from this mysterious feeling. He slowly exhaled, looked straight at Luocio, and said in a deep voice, "What is your purpose?" Luocio smiled and said, "Mr. Chen, have you ever thought of working under me?" Chen Mingming was shocked and was silent for a while. "Why me?" Luocio said indifferently, "Because fate has guided you to me." Chen Mingming was stunned and frowned. This reason made him feel a little unreal, even Chunibyu. "I'm kidding." Luocio smiled slightly. "You shouldn't mind. As for the reason, I think if possible, I hope you can find it yourself." "The premise is that I join you?" "The premise is that you join us." "Just to accept your invitation?" "Of course, you also need to meet the requirements." "What requirements?" Luocio waved his hand and 2 sheepskin scrolls appeared in his hand. He put the sheepskin scrolls on the table and chuckled. "Just treat it as an assessment. This is the background information and test questions for the assessment." Chen Mingming subconsciously took them. Luocio said indifferently, "Don't be in a hurry to open them. I won't force you. These 2 scrolls will be kept for 12 hours. You have 12 hours to think about it. When the time is up and you don't open them, they will naturally disappear and you will forget what happened today. But once you open them within the time limit, you must complete it within 5 days. Otherwise, you will lose your qualification and forget this matter at the same time. The choice is yours." 5 days. Chen Mingming nodded. It was only 5 days since he left the country. Chapter 1208. As time went by, Zhao Lu was secretly anxious. He sat in a room outside, silently looking at his mobile phone. There was no signal. He was brought into this building not long ago, and it was in the middle of the downtown area. How could there be no signal? Zhao Lu couldn't help but think of today's encounter with those guys with power. His brain couldn't help but be in a mess. He felt that he, an ordinary person, was inexplicably involved in an unknown event. Zhao Lu also thought of the scene where Dong Xiaofeng saved him in the end. He still felt that it was incredible. He subconsciously looked at the room in front of him. Dong Xiaofeng was brought in at this time for further treatment. He didn't know the situation. "Oh, so you are here. Come with me, young man." A spirited young man walked in front of Zhao Lu with a smile on his face and said loudly, "Bu Bu Gao. There is no way to solve it for the time being?" In the room, Dong Xiaofeng had already woken up earlier. His body was wrapped in a thick layer of bandages, and his heel had also been bandaged. According to the man named Lu Mingho, the injury on his heel would not affect his original athletic ability after it was healed. At this time, Dong Xiaofeng was not too concerned about the injury on his body. Instead, he was thinking about another thing. He didn't know what happened after Xiang Chong stabbed his chest with the dagger, but he remembered the scene when Xiang Chong stabbed him with the dagger, or rather, Xiang Chong's appearance at that time. Obviously, it was not the appearance of a human. Wei Zidao on the side cleared his throat at this time. "Student Dong Xiaofeng, I am sorry about your injury. With the conditions of our office, we really can't get rid of the residual strange power in your body. At present, we can only stop the residual power. Well, you can think of it as a means of sealing." Dong Xiaofeng's ability to accept things was very strong, at least after seeing Xiang Chong's abnormal and terrifying appearance. Of course, a part of the video recording of the battle with the mysterious youth 24 that Lu Mingho showed him was enough to prove this point, but the most important thing was his own fatal injury. His heel, abdomen, and even his chest were pierced by the dagger, but he was able to get out of bed in just a few hours. Although his body was still very weak, normal medical treatment was probably impossible. Then, will this affect me in the future? Dong Xiaofeng frowned. Lu Mingho hesitated for a moment and finally told the truth. "We can't give you a correct answer. Because the remnant energy in your body is a little strange, even if it is temporarily sealed, we cannot be sure how it will affect you if it stays in your body. In addition, we cannot be sure how long the seal will last. After all, this kind of seal is only a temporary measure that we can use to deal with it. My companions and I aren't the type that specializes in sealing and healing. In other words, there are people who specialize in sealing or healing, right? Where is it? Dong Xiaofeng frowned and said calmly, You claim that you exist to protect the people. You can't just leave a victim like me to die, right? Of course. Lu Mingho nodded. At the same time, he was rather surprised by this young college student. After all, not only was he able to accept the situation, he was also abnormally calm. After the incident, he didn't panic, or perhaps he did panic, but his heart was strong enough. Then, invite him here. Dong Xiaofeng nodded. At the same time, his expression relaxed slightly. Wei Zidao couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I'm afraid it's not possible now. This student, our stronghold in this city, is a bit special. Generally, we won't send people here. Then what should I do? Dong Xiaofeng didn't make a fuss, but asked calmly. Although he was still a student because of his family, he had seen a lot of situations in the workplace and officialdom since he was a child. Especially the shirking of responsibility, it was even more common. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao didn't have a cold attitude, which made him feel that the so-called administration was really people-oriented. You can rest assured about this. Lu Mingho smiled slightly. Although it's not possible here, we can send you to a place with conditions for treatment. We have better conditions in the provincial government. I believe that you can completely recover. However, we can't guarantee how long it will take. You may need to leave here for a while, so you'd better discuss it with your family. No need. Dong Xiaofeng said indifferently, It's decided. I can go to the place you mentioned at any time. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao looked at each other. They didn't expect Dong Xiaofeng to agree so quickly. Lu Mingho nodded. Well, we'll arrange someone to send you there. It just so happened that Bu Gao came here. He could do this job. Thank you. Dong Xiaofeng slowly exhaled and then said, When I go there, if someone asks me about this, I'll say that you saved me. Lu Mingho looked at Dong Xiaofeng in surprise. He was not afraid that Dong Xiaofeng would make a fuss. After all, every mission was recorded when necessary, especially when there was a battle, and Dong Xiaofeng's record was before they arrived. It was reasonable to say that there would be no problem. However, if Dong Xiaofeng went to the provincial government and insisted that he and Wei Zidao treated him carelessly and didn't pay attention, which led to the failure to get rid of the mutant power in the end, it would be a little troublesome. The investigation in the bureau naturally wouldn't believe the words of an ordinary person. However, if he made a fuss, it would inevitably spread. Most of the agents in the bureau were carefully selected. They were not tempted by things like money, but they were very protective of their reputation. After all, among the agents in the bureau, apart from their own strength, the only thing they could compare with was their reputation. However, during the initial period of the bureau's construction, because of the loopholes in the management, and because of the mixed relationship between the disciples of the Taoist sect and the demon clan, there were often mishandled things. Many people had been treated badly. Later, the management was improved day by day, and the people-oriented principle was more emphasized. Every agent had a strict record. For drugs like fragment withdrawal, there were also strict standards for the use. After a long time, the Bureau's style of work became more decent. Especially after the Mount Tai incident, all the staff learned the core spirit of try not to provoke the conflict between the people and the Bureau, and between the Transcendents and the Bureau. If it was before, Lu Mingho would have more ways to deal with it. However, now was the time when the wind was blowing, so he naturally had to be more careful. We're just doing our job. Lu Mingho smiled at this time, and his attitude was naturally much gentler. Dong Xiaofeng suddenly asked, Xiang Chang is dead? How will you deal with this matter? Lu Mingho said casually, We naturally have a way to deal with it. You don't have to worry about this student. We'll do our best to let you return to your daily life. We won't let your future life be affected by this matter. What about Zhaolu? Dong Xiaofeng raised his head. I mean the one you brought back with you. Him, what? What is this? Looking at the small capsule and a glass of water that Bubugao gave him, Zhao Lu couldn't help but feel a little scared. Fragment, the name of this medicine. Bubugao sat down casually, crossed his legs and said, after you eat it, you'll forget what happened in the past few hours. Basically, if there's no special situation in the future, you won't remember it either. Zhao Lu hesitated and asked carefully, this medicine? Is there any other danger? Don't worry, Bubugao said calmly. This medicine has been tested on the spot for more than 10,000 times. As long as a person doesn't take more than 10, there'll be no problem. Zhao Lu asked curiously, what if it's more than 10? Bubugao shrugged and said, it's best if you don't know. Besides, the average person can't eat more than 10 pieces, at most 1 or 2 pieces. If you can really accumulate 10 pieces, then I have to admire your disaster physique. You can meet us more than 10 times. Zhao Lu forced a smile. After I eat it, can I leave? Bubugao nodded. Of course, you've already given your statement. We won't trouble you again in the future. At most, they would send someone to secretly observe and see if the fragment had any effect. That's good. Zhao Lu nodded. But at this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao walked in with Dong Xiaofeng. Bubugao didn't dare to sit in such a wonderful posture. He quickly stood up. Come out for a while. Lu Mingho said to Bubugao, then looked at Dong Xiaofeng and said calmly, I'll give you half an hour. They sat and looked at each other. There was a table's distance between them. Dong Xiaofeng and Zhao Lu didn't say anything first. Time passed little by little. Zhao Lu thought of I'll give you half an hour. Suddenly, Dong Xiaofeng took out his mobile phone. He took out the SIM card in front of Zhao Lu, then pressed the phone on the table and pushed it directly to Zhao Lu. The phone slipped out and slid into Zhao Li's arms. He frowned. What's the meaning of this? Dong Xiaofeng said calmly. Nothing, I'm just tired of playing with you. It's boring. Do you think I'll be so bored to play with you all the time? If I have the time, I might as well find a few more girls. Zhao Lu sneered. But it was a good thing that he handed over his mobile phone. This was probably the best thing that happened to him all day. Dong Xiaofeng said again, I've thrown away Mingjin's mobile phone. Xiang Chang is also dead. No one will find trouble with you in the future. Continue with your ordinary life. Thank you very much, Zhao Lu replied calmly. But he soon frowned. Because he remembered something, that was the memory lapse. If he took this thing, Dong Xiaofeng might also take this medicine. If he forgot about it, then in the future, would he? Don't worry, I won't take this medicine in the short term. Dong Xiaofeng seemed to have seen through Zhao Li's worries. He said casually, they said this medicine can only erase a few hours of memory. Even if I take it in the future, I won't forget what happened today. Zhao Li's expression became slightly better. He couldn't forget what Dong Xiaofeng did to him just because Dong Xiaofeng saved him in the end. At this moment, at most, he would treat it as a draw. He didn't want to have any more interactions with Dong Xiaofeng. Thinking of this, Zhao Lu didn't want to wait for half an hour. He reached out and grabbed the memory lapse in his hand. At the same time, he picked up the cup of water. Are you really going to eat it? Dong Xiaofeng asked suddenly. Zhao Lu was stunned. He subconsciously looked over and saw Dong Xiaofeng looking at him with bright eyes. What do you mean? If I don't eat it, how can I leave this place? Dong Xiaofeng said. If you eat it, you'll completely forget what happened. You won't remember the different things you've encountered, the extraordinary things you've encountered, the other side of the world. I'm afraid you won't have such a chance in the future. Are you willing to be ordinary for the rest of your life? So what? Zhao Lu laughed. No matter how extraordinary things are, I'm just an ordinary person. Facing that so-called power, I don't even have the strength to resist. Even if I remember it, what's the use? Dong Xiaofeng said indifferently, I heard there's another way to deal with it. You've seen it too. People like Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao often travel around, and there are many people like them. This is a very large organization. Zhao Lu frowned. Dong Xiaofeng continued, obviously, these people are capable people. And they can't do everything by themselves, so there must be an even larger team behind them to support their work. What do you mean? Zhao Li's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely understood Dong Xiaofeng's meaning. Dong Xiaofeng smiled and said, under normal circumstances, ordinary people who encounter events also have a chance to join this organization. Of course, not everyone can meet this condition. First of all, you have to be young, and you have to pass their test. Only after passing all aspects can you have a chance to join this organization, but generally you're just a non-staff member. Although you're just a non-staff member, your life is completely different. A bigger world is waiting for you. As I said, these things have nothing to do with me. Zhao Lu shook his head. I'm just a very ordinary person, so ordinary that I don't dare to make mistakes. As I said before, you guys treated me like this, and I even thought of killing you. But in the end, I won't do that. I won't destroy myself. Dong Xiaofeng looked at Zhao Lu without saying a word. He just looked at him. Zhao Lu took a deep breath and suddenly laughed. He said in a self-deprecating manner, it's like what you have. I'm just an egg which will break with a touch. You're a jade which will be fine after you rub it. The world is so unfair. But so what? What I have, you may not have. I can be happy for a very ordinary meal, but for you, you may lose your appetite even if you put exotic delicacies in front of you. What I want is the happiness and happiness of ordinary people. I don't want to live in fear every day after becoming extraordinary, making my family worry. Do you know what kind of people are the most common in this world? Dong Xiaofeng subconsciously asked. Ordinary people? Zhao Lu shook his head and said seriously, ordinary people. Dong Xiaofeng was startled and opened his mouth. Stunned, Zhao Lu directly opened his mouth and swallowed the capsule in his hand. He gulped it down with water without any hesitation. Dong Xiaofeng finally heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't spit out the words on the tip of his tongue. Thank you for saving me. This was the last sentence Zhao Lu said before he lost consciousness. Dong Xiaofeng shook his head and looked at Zhao Lu, who had fallen asleep on the table. Finally, he smiled bitterly. I still can't remember. If I had known, I wouldn't have lost weight. Not long after, Lu Mingho came in. Dong Xiaofeng stood up with his hands on the table. Please. Lu Mingho didn't say anything. Just take it as a reward for this smart kid. A cold wind blew and Zhao Lu shivered. He looked around and found that he was sitting in a park. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. But he soon remembered what had happened. That was, Dong Xiaofeng had suddenly called him out, ruthlessly beat him up, and then returned all the things that he had used to blackmail him. Looking at the phone in his hand with the SIM card taken away, Zhao Lu still couldn't believe it. But he felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulder, which made him feel that it was real. But Zhao Lu felt that it was okay to let this guy beat him up and solve everything. But Dong Xiaofeng's sudden action really puzzled Zhao Lu. He had a lot of doubts in his heart, but he couldn't figure out the reason. Zhao Lu shook his head and looked at the time. It was already 7 o'clock in the evening. He couldn't help but feel nervous. He quickly stood up and ran out of the park. When he passed by the river, Zhao Lu hesitated for a moment. When he saw that there was no one around, he directly threw the silver pistol in his bag into the river and quickly left this place. Zhao Lu had just left when two black shadows suddenly came out from the side. One of them was unusually huge. They were Bu Bugao and Wang Hu. The administration wouldn't let Zhao Lu leave so easily. After all, they didn't know if the mysterious young man 24 would suddenly turn back in the afternoon and do something to hurt Zhao Lu, so there would be time to protect him temporarily. The task naturally fell on Bu Bugao and Wang Hu. Bu Bugao didn't mind doing more things to fight for the opportunity to show off. As for Wang Hu, he basically followed Bu Bugao and took one step at a time. She seems to have thrown something. Wang Hu looked at the flowing river and said. Bu Bugao yawned and said casually, maybe it's trash. It's really immoral. Wang Hu suddenly jumped into the water, but soon jumped out of the water. He wasn't wet, but he was holding a shoe that was about to rot in his hand. Wang Hu shook his head and casually tossed the thing that he had scooped up back in. Bu Bugao directly pulled Wang Hu away. They were responsible for temporarily protecting Zhao Li's safety. When they arrived at the rehabilitation center, Zhao Lu found his sister in the waiting area. After a day of recovery training, Zhang Xiaoqin seemed to be extremely tired. She leaned against the chair and fell asleep. Zhao Lu sat down, but Zhang Xiaoqin was alerted. Little brother, you're here. I couldn't get through to your phone. I was so worried. My phone ran out of battery. Zhao Lu smiled and said, I rushed over, but today is Friday. The traffic is bad. It's already so late? Zhang Xiaoqin saw that Zhao Lu was fine, so she naturally felt relieved and didn't continue to ask. Let's go and eat. I'll celebrate for you. Zhao Lu smiled and then took out the prepared gift from his bag. Sister, happy birthday! Thank you. This was enough to be happy. Zhang Xiaoqin showed a happy smile. Later, Wei Zidao came to the room temporarily arranged for Dong Xiaofeng. The reason why he let Zhao Lu leave was that he considered that Zhao Lu could only be regarded as half a participant in the whole matter. Dong Xiaofeng's body had the remaining power of 24. If the mysterious young man really wanted to find trouble, he should find Dong Xiaofeng. So, in the eyes of Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao, the person who needed more protection was Dong Xiaofeng. It's probably not comparable to home, but it's not bad. You can only stay here for a few days. It's safer. Wei Zidao smiled slightly. If you need anything, you can tell me. Dong Xiaofeng nodded. There was not even a window here. He looked at the clock on the wall and suddenly asked, Is there a candle? Candle? Wei Zidao was stunned. Chapter 1209. In the narrow and neat basement, the crows kept cawing. The young man walked out of the dim bathroom with bandages wrapped around his body. He casually threw out the towel used to wipe his sweat and covered the birdcage. The crows stopped cawing. The young man slumped on the sofa. His eyes were still lifeless, but his lips would twitch a few times from time to time. What he had learned could ensure that he would not die in that kind of situation where his ribs pierced his lungs, but it could not heal his injuries quickly. After all, the curse technique did not have any healing properties. I didn't expect. 24 slumped on the sofa and said to himself, It seems that it is a bit difficult to recover to a certain level. Well, he was an extremely lazy person. He even felt that thinking about problems was a waste of time, so he chose to sleep. Let's move to another place after I wake up, 24 subconsciously thought, and gradually his consciousness sank into the dream. You have 5 missed calls. When he returned home, Chen Mingming turned on his phone. There were 5 missed calls, 3 from Zhou Yuxing and 2 from his mother. In addition, there was a message from Zhou Yuxing. I want to discuss the issue of going abroad again. There was also a message from his mother. I need to hand over the company's affairs, so I may come back very late, don't wait. He was alone in his house again. With the lamp on, Chen Mingming sat in front of the table. In front of the table, there was a silver pistol placed there when he came in. The pistol was bound to him. It could be lent, but it would not be lost. It returned to this place naturally because Zhao Lu had discarded it. But in the end, not everyone would choose the most extreme method. Chen Mingming picked up the silver pistol with a complicated smile on his face. Then, he made it disappear again. It could appear or disappear according to his thoughts. It is really amazing, something that can only happen in fantasy. Chen Mingming thought to himself. Logically speaking, or more accurately speaking, from the moment he obtained it, he shouldn't have been so calm. He himself didn't know when his heart had become so unperturbed. Maybe it started when he met the figure on the riverbank that seemed to be very close to him, but also seemed to be very far away. Perhaps it was even earlier. Chen Mingming always felt that he had forgotten something since he was sent away by the servant girl. He tried to think if there was anything he had forgotten, but when he thought about it carefully, there was nothing in his memory that couldn't be connected. Chen Mingming sat down quietly as he recalled the last words the boss had said to him. The 2 parchment scrolls were placed on the desk. If they were not opened, they would disappear with time. If they were to open, he would only have 5 days to complete the task. Chen Mingming remained silent. The moment he obtained the pistol, he didn't feel too excited. He just felt that it was magical. When he confirmed that it indeed had the ability to kill people from a distance without leaving any traces, he didn't feel too moved. He even vaguely felt that this was reasonable enough. However, when those countless lights and shadows floated in front of him, watching every minute and second of the world, an unprecedented throbbing in his soul caused him to not be as calm as he appeared to be. He had always been very decisive in doing things. This was a character that he had cultivated since he was young. Therefore, he opened the first parchment scroll and carefully read the floating words on it. The boss had said that this was the background information and test questions for the assessment. Today, a dismembered body case happened in the city. The deceased, Wang Liang, was dismembered and hidden in a rented house. Chen Mingming subconsciously frowned. Regarding this case, it had caused a sensation. He had also learned about this matter from the internet. Chen Mingming controlled his impatience and continued reading. At the same time, a similar dismembered body case happened in another place. The deceased, Wu Rong, was Wang Liang's girlfriend. The words on the parchment scroll were written one after another, detailing the relationship between Wang Liang and Wu Rong, as well as Wang Liang's entanglement with several other women, including Zhang Xiaoqin's attempted suicide. Chen Mingming felt that the content on the parchment scroll was almost all the information the police had on the 2 dismembered body cases so far. The key person, Zhao Lu. These were the last words on the parchment scroll. Chen Mingming waited for a moment. When he didn't see any new words, he began to open the second parchment scroll. This should be the test questions. There were 2 questions. Requirement 1. Assist Zhou Yuxing to find the real murderer. Requirement 2. Learn to cry. Chen Mingming didn't feel too surprised about the first requirement. From the content of the first parchment scroll, it was naturally related to the 2 dismembered body cases. However, the first requirement made Chen Mingming silent for a long time. After a long time, Chen Mingming picked up the phone and had a plan in mind. Since the first requirement was to assist Zhou Yuxing in solving the case, it was not suitable for him to investigate in secret. Even if he was doing the same thing, it didn't mean that it would be more efficient to do it separately. The key was how to persuade Zhou Yuxing to participate in this case. The key person, Zhao Lu. Chen Mingming looked at the last words on the first parchment scroll and waited for the call to be connected. Hello? Mingming? Why are you calling me at this time? Can I ask you for a favor? He accepted the test question. Yu Yi was making a glass of wine for Luoqiu. Luoqiu seemed to be looking forward to it. He directly made the wine and slowly pushed it in front of him. Luoqiu picked up the cup and sniffed it, saying softly, "Mengpe? I improved it a little." The servant girl chuckled. "Mengpe was too sad, so I added some orange juice. The taste should be much better." Luoqiu tasted it. This was the final product of the Daylily series. This was the prototype of Mengpe's soup. If it was allowed to work, it would probably give him a good dream, right? Luoqiu slowly closed his eyes. The old gramophone in the corner also started to play at this time. Is that Dong Xiaofeng asleep? In the middle of the night, the 2 agents of the agency were still working overtime. Lu Mingho was writing the report of the battle with the mysterious young man 24 today. How many bullets were used, what spells were used, how much damage was caused, the number of casualties, and so on, all needed to be reported in detail, especially the suggestions for dealing with the aftermath. After the suggestions were sent, the agency would have a special evaluation. After the evaluation passed, it would be handed over to the logistics department to deal with, and the whole process would be completed within 48 hours. In short, one of the most important purposes of the agency was to cover up the influence of the supernatural on society as quickly as possible. Wei Zidao brought 2 cups of coffee and sat down, saying casually, "That guy went to sleep after celebrating his birthday." "Birthday?" Lu Mingho was stunned and stopped. Wei Zidao shrugged, saying, "It seems to be today, right? It's just past 12. This may be the most unforgettable birthday for this guy." Lu Mingho drank the coffee and seemed to be more energetic. "I didn't expect that this guy would want to participate in the assessment of the logistics department." Wei Zidao smiled, saying, "Brother Hao, didn't you mention it on purpose? When he asked us how to deal with Zhao Luo, it was you who accidentally mentioned several different ways to deal with him, right?" Lu Mingho smiled. There were some things that they didn't tell Dong Xiaofeng, and that was about the foreign energy left in his body. This strange power transmitted from Xiang Chang's dagger to Dong Xiaofeng did leave some of it in Dong Xiaofeng's body, and it was sealed by Lu Mingho himself, but it wasn't impossible to get rid of it, as Lu Mingho said. Although the foreign energy was strange, it wasn't impossible to get rid of it on the spot. After all, there was only a small amount of it left. No matter how strange the energy was, it couldn't escape the law of strength and quantity. No matter how strong a football was, a small iron ball wouldn't be heavier than a cart of cotton. I didn't expect that the foreign energy left in Dong Xiaofeng's body would cause some strange changes in his body. Lu Mingho frowned, saying, "I found that his somatic cell activity increased greatly, 3 times that of a normal person. He probably doesn't know that his physical fitness has far surpassed that of some top athlete. It's a blessing in disguise." Wei Zidao smiled, saying, "Under the effect of the seal, I don't know how much this power will improve his body. But no matter how much, he is obviously no longer an ordinary person." Lu Mingho nodded, saying, "The Bureau is short of people now. Recently, they have started to select some talented people from the National Army. As for us, we also have the obligation to find talents among the people. I hope that this time Dong Xiaofeng will give us a little surprise. This kid is very smart and calm. Think about it and he may be useful." Wei Zidao smiled. Lu Mingho sighed and then asked, "By the way, how's the information about this mysterious young man?" Wei Zidao said seriously, "I have searched the Bureau's database, but didn't find the existence of this person. Whether it's his abilities, weapons, or even the way he attacked, there's no record of him at all. There's not even a reference. In other words, it's all blank?" Lu Mingho frowned and said seriously, "This is troublesome. Although the world is big, we have collected information about Kelowna Transcendent Taoists, and even some foreign Transcendent Taoists over the years." At this time, Lu Mingho received an email. He glanced at it and said, "The orders from the top have approved Dong Xiaofeng's participation in the assessment, approved the arrest of 24, and asked that we try to capture him alive. But we don't have enough people," Wei Zidao said with difficulty. Lu Mingho said, "There are also temporary orders to delay the arrival of Bu Bu Gao and temporarily assist us." "Bu Bu Gao?" Wei Zidao frowned, saying, "This kid is nothing. But this Wang Hu, I keep feeling that there is something wrong. Brother Hao, this Wang Hu doesn't look like an ordinary Taoist, no matter how you look at him." Lu Mingho said, "I have checked Wang Hu's information. He is indeed logged in, but only recently. But his previous information is also blank. But many Taoists lurk deep in the mountains and forests, and there are many cases of them suddenly appearing. But usually they have to go through an investigation, assessment, and a period of observation before they are approved to be sent to support logistics. I don't know what method this Bu Bu Gao used to let Wang Hu pass so easily." Wei Zidao shook his head and joked, saying, "Could it be that he got the young lady from the Human Resources Department into his bed? Who cares?" Lu Mingho had been in the Bureau for a longer time, and he had seen many strange things in the bureau. Since there is no problem with the file, we can just use it. This 24 has a mysterious background, and his combat power is not ordinary, but Wang Hu was able to suppress him with brute force. This is obviously a good thing for us. Wei Zidao nodded. Right, the settlement plan has also been approved. Lu Mingho looked at the new email on the computer again, saying, "Tomorrow morning, go to the police station and visit Bureau Chief Lu. Tell him that the case of the prisoner in the detention center and Chang Shao can be closed. We have found the prisoner, so let him withdraw the case." Understood. Early in the morning. Why don't you go in? Facing this frequent visitor of the criminal police team 1 and the afternoon tea delivery man, Lin Feng felt that he was under a lot of pressure. "Miss Rin, you also know that this case has a lot of attention from the higher-ups, we can't reveal it casually," Ren Xiling said unhappily. "I didn't even go to the crime scene, and it was almost a week before I came over. I even brought breakfast for you. Other reporters have already dug up all kinds of gossip, but you guys are so good, you don't even leave me any leftovers to eat. How can you be like this?" If it were other reporters, we would have kicked them out, no matter who they were, but Lin Feng didn't dare to say that, so he could only continue to greet this lady with a bitter face. Even though she had restrained herself a lot, which even made Sir Ma feel that this lady had changed her temperament, while Nanny Ren was showing her true nature, Lin Feng was having a hard time dealing with her. But in the corridor, a cold short-haired woman in a suit walked slowly. It was a kind of compensation. Looking at the short-haired woman's black stockings, Officer Lin felt that today was not too bad. "Who is she?" Ren Xiling couldn't help but ask curiously. "Oh, the first forensic doctor in the police station," Lin Feng said casually. "Her name is Nan Xiaonan, she has just been here for a few days, so you haven't seen her before." "The new forensic doctor?" Nanny Ren rolled her eyes, and then directly took back the breakfast bag in Lin Feng's hand. "Well, I'm leaving, you can go back now." "But breakfast? I'd rather eat than give it to you bastards. Eat by yourself." "How can you be so realistic?" Chapter 12:10. Almost instantly, Nan Xiaonan considered many things. Based on past experience, there would more or less be people blessed by the heavens in different eras of the subworld. They would have unimaginable luck. Simply put, they were people who could reach the peak of the world. This type of person was either a genius or someone with a firm will. However, in the same era, how many geniuses and firm wills were there? So why were there people who could reach the peak in the end, and why were there people who achieved nothing their whole lives? Time, fate, luck. Unknowingly, the will of fate favored certain people. The only difference was the degree of favor and the amount of protection. Nan Xiaonan was also the type who had been protected by the world in the past. Otherwise, she would not have been able to reach the peak of her own world, and finally grasp a sliver of a chance to escape the shackles of a subworld. Back then, the protection she had from the will of the world was only the protection of a region, but it had already given her endless possibilities. She really could not imagine how powerful the protection of an entire world could be. She was definitely the child of the world. However, Nan Xiaonan could faintly feel that this woman was somewhat different from the true child of the world. The true child of the world was definitely the person who led an entire generation forward, the carrier who could change the structure of the entire world, the person who could influence the people around them at all times, and the person who could move in a certain direction. But on Ren Xiling, Nan Xiaonan only felt the protection of the will of the world. Moreover, she was very sure that this woman was just an ordinary person. At most, she was very healthy, and her constitution was a little better than ordinary people, but not out of the ordinary. This made Nan Xiaonan puzzled even after much thought. The protection of an entire subworld is just for protection? Nan Xiaonan was not only shocked when she came to this conclusion, but also felt that it was inconceivable. As the time she spent in this subworld increased, she felt more and more that this subworld was dangerous. First, Nan Xiaonan sensed a super-powerful creature that was not any weaker than her main body. Then, she sensed a huge dark intent that she could only submit to. Today, she met a woman who was protected by the will of an entire subworld. Nan Xiaonan really wondered if her luck was too bad. Another possibility was that even if she had fused with the native soul of this subworld and managed to stay, she would still be discovered by the will of this subworld. And this woman who had the protection of the will of the child world was influenced by the will of the child world, which was why she approached him. We can't expose ourselves. In an instant, Nan Xiaonan had already made a decision. Any contact with this kind of person who was protected by the will of the world would be an extremely dangerous thing for stowaways. However, what Nan Xiaonan didn't expect was that she would still run into this strange woman when she returned to her office after circling around for a long time. In the office, Xiao Bao was happily eating the breakfast brought by Ren Xiling. At this time, when he saw Nan Xiaonan come in, he directly greeted her. "Good morning, Section Chief Nan." "So this is Section Chief Nan." Ren Xiling smiled. Obviously, she had already gotten Nan Xiaonan's information from Xiao Bao. Nanny Ren was holding a steaming bun and greeted her warmly. "Come, don't be polite. Have some breakfast first? Don't come near me." Although she was roaring in her heart, Nan Xiaonan still said calmly, "I have already eaten, thank you." Xiao Bao. "This is?" "She is Aunt Ren. Sister Ren." Under Ren Xiling's caring gaze, Xiao Bao quickly changed the way he addressed her. "Hello." Nan Xiaonan nodded, then walked back to her seat and sat down. Ren Xiling gave Xiao Bao a warning look at this time. The latter shrank his head in fear, and then quietly minimized the game interface. Nanny Ren walked to Nan Xiaonan with a smile and said seriously, "Forensic Dr. Nan, what do you think about the recent dismembered corpse case?" Nan Xiaonan was stunned. She didn't know why this woman would ask about this matter, but she thought that since this woman could walk around freely in the bureau, she probably had a position. She had only been here for a few days, and she didn't visit every department. It was not strange that she didn't know them. Nan Xiaonan just wanted to send her away without showing any flaws as soon as possible. She felt that it was too dangerous here, so she considered whether she should transfer. While thinking, Nan Xiaonan said casually, "Well, at present, it seems that the two dismembered corpse cases were done by the same person. According to the scene of the murderer should be an extremely rational person." She slowly said all the speculations about the murderer so far, and occasionally mixed in some of her own personal opinions. Nanny Ren kept nodding and memorizing it in her notebook. One question, one answer. Time passed unknowingly. Only Xiao Bao's face became more and more strange and ugly. In the end, he didn't even look at her. "I'm afraid that Sir Ma will beat me to death if he knows." Finally, Ren Xiling left with a satisfied smile, and said that she would come often in the future. Nan Xiaonan secretly heaved a sigh of relief. With this woman, who was suspected to be the child of the world, standing beside her, she felt as if the will of the child of the world was staring at her all the time. She was already drenched in cold sweat. "By the way, Xiao Bao, which department is this Ren? Sister Ren from? Why haven't I seen her before?" Nan Xiaonan made up her mind to avoid this department as much as possible. As for the transfer, it should also be put on the agenda. Xiao Bao sighed at this time. "Well, Chief Nan, she's not from our department, she's just a reporter." Nan Xiaonan slightly opened her mouth and then frowned. "Reporter?" Xiao Bao hurriedly said, "But it doesn't matter. She's a bit special. Even if the higher-ups know that you've said so much, they won't say anything. If you don't say anything, no one will know." Nan Xiaonan seemed to be relieved and nodded. "So that's how it is. So he's just a reporter. Fortunately, he's not from the unit. But why would an ordinary human reporter, not someone who can lead an era, be protected by the world?" She couldn't figure out the ins and outs of the matter. On this side, seeing Nan Xiaonan let out a sigh of relief at this moment, Xiao Bao, who didn't know the reason for her sigh of relief, also felt a little relieved. Thus, the two people with different thoughts started a new day of work. But what Xiao Bao didn't know was that Nan Xiaonan had already begun to apply for a transfer. To be safe, a slight mistake could lead to eternal damnation. Looking at the information she got from Nan Xiaonan with satisfaction, Nanny Ren was about to leave proudly. But when she passed by the reception room, she accidentally saw a young man sitting inside. Ren Xiling was a bit curious about this young man and couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. Why is this little guy? Looking at the young man who was staring out of the window in a daze, Ren Xiling's mind wandered for a moment. Instantly, 3 or 4 years ago, when her husband left, the image of the child who was like an empty shell seemed to overlap with this image. Ren Xiling, why are you here? But in the next moment, a surprised voice woke Ren Xiling up. Nanny Ren was startled and saw Ma Haud walking quickly towards her. You've got the wrong person. Ren Xiling didn't dare to stay any longer. She turned around and ran towards the stairs. Wait, don't run, I have something to ask you. Sir Ma quickly chased after her. Zhou Yuxing, who came with him, frowned at this time. Looking at the back of the fleeing figure, he didn't know why, but he seemed to feel a little sad. So she's Captain Luo's. Zhou Yuxing took a deep breath. After taking the new medicine from Gawain these days, his condition seemed to be better than before. It seemed that he was getting better day by day. The depression that accumulated in his heart seemed to have cleared a lot, and the symptoms of his headache were not as frequent as before, although he still couldn't remember what happened at the end of the case a few years ago. For Zhou Yuxing, although he had forgotten how he fought with the gangsters and how they both fell off the building, he didn't forget what happened before. It was that dazzling man who helped him break free from the quagmire in an instant and made him stop resting. Over the years, Zhou Yuxing would go to Captain Luo's grave once a month, insisting on reporting his work. He was very grateful to the man who saved him. Even if he was buried in the ground forever, Zhou Yuxing wanted him to know that he didn't fail to live up to the oath he made before he joined the force. After calming down, Zhou Yuxing walked into the reception room. The young man sitting there was Chen Mingming. Chen Mingming was thinking about how to persuade Zhou Yuxing to let him participate in this case. This was basically impossible, but Chen Mingming had a plan in mind and thought of a reason. The small commotion outside the conference room just now didn't affect Chen Mingming's thinking. At this time, seeing that Zhou Yuxing finally came in, he was about to speak directly. Unexpectedly, Zhou Yuxing said at this time, "So you were here. It took me a while to find you." Well, don't be lazy, the meeting is about to start. Go get ready. Meeting? Chen Mingming frowned, feeling a little confused by Zhou Yuxing's words. Zhou Yuxing nodded and said, "Yes, meeting. Yesterday, I asked you to reorganize the case report of the dismembered body case. Have you finished it?" Chen Mingming opened his mouth in surprise and was about to say something. At this time, Zhou Yuxing suddenly came forward and frowned. "You child, you're not a person who usually forgets things. Why did you throw your ID on the ground?" Zhou Yuxing bent down to pick up the ID, and then stuffed it into Chen Mingming's hand. Chen Mingming looked at the ID in his hand and his pupils contracted slightly. On the ID, his photo was so clear. This was the ID with his identity written, member of the second team. "When did I become a police officer?" Chen Mingming asked subconsciously. Zhou Yuxing looked at Chen Mingming strangely, then smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "When? Last year, I saw you take the oath with my own eyes." Last year, in an instant, Chen Mingming had already understood. So, it turned out that he had already arranged his identity? No wonder the case information was so carefully written on the parchment. Even the identity was directly prepared. But he didn't know if this was only changing Zhou Yuxing's memory or the entire police station's. From the time he opened the parchment until now, it had only been one night, and already it seemed that he had underestimated the ability of the boss. But this was also good. After all, according to the actual situation, no matter what reason was used to participate in the case, Chen Mingming felt that it was very far-fetched. He was not even sure that he could persuade Zhou Yuxing to agree. After that, Chen Mingming walked out of the reception room with Zhou Yuxing. After that, he couldn't help but be curious. In this modified relationship, what was the situation between his father and his mother now? Along the way, he met many people. While they greeted Zhou Yuxing, they also nodded at him, as if they were already very familiar with him, and said something like father, like son. Chen Mingming finally knew that he had indeed been integrated into this system. Ren Xiling, don't run. Stop right there. After chasing her all the way to the parking lot, Sir Ma was already a little out of breath. Finally, after Ren Xiling hid in his mini, he stopped her. Why are you running? Sir Ma asked angrily. I have something urgent to do, can't I? Ren Xiling was considering whether she should step on the gas pedal hard. What urgent? Forget it, let's not talk about this. There's something I need to tell you. Ma Haud wiped his sweat and said, I was going to look for you 2 days later, but you just showed up. Ling Feng will be here in a few days, and I might not have time. Can you see if you have time to go and pick up the plane? Dumbo is coming? Ren Xiling was stunned. She was a little confused. The last time she saw him was only a few days ago, and that was because of the geological disaster at Mount Tai. Yeah. Ma Haud nodded. Ling Feng said that he's preparing to be transferred, and I haven't been able to contact him for a while. Moreover, I've been away for a long time. Coincidentally, there's a short break before the transfer, so I decided to come back and meet an old friend. I see. Ren Xiling nodded. Okay, tell me the time, and I'll pick him up. Luoqiu is also coming back. When did little Luoqiu come back? Ma Haud was stunned, and then he said angrily, Why didn't you tell me? I saw that you were busy, so I didn't tell you. Ren Xiling shrugged and said, Anyway, you can take some time to come over during the meal. You will be able to see it. Okay, that's fine. Ma Haud nodded and sighed. I'm so tired. I didn't even know why you were running, and I had to chase after you. I thought you knew that I got a lot of money from Nan Xiaonan. What? You're with Nan Xiaonan. Don't run. Boom! The bright red Mini finally stepped on the accelerator. In the capital, Ling Feng was packing his things in the camp. After the Mount Tai incident, he accepted the transfer to that department and would participate in the training of that department. There was no doubt that he would come into contact with a whole new field. He was a soldier, and his duty was to protect the country. Therefore, after receiving the order from the top, he did not hesitate at all. However, before that, the organization gave him a short break. After all, if he really joined that department, it would be difficult for him to have a break in the future. Brother Luo, I haven't seen your son for a long time. I wonder how he looks now. I still remember when you brought him to the army to train. I didn't expect that more than 10 years had passed. Chapter 12:11. In the conference room, Chen Mingming recalled what he had read from the parchment and compared it with the analysis of the case. However, he found that the contents of the parchment were exactly the same as what the police had. Not only the information, but even the identity had been prepared. It seemed that the boss didn't deliberately make things difficult for him. In fact, it was completely convenient for him. On the other hand, the time to solve the case was now within 5 days. So far, we have tracked down the other 2 women who are related to Wang Liang. The person in charge of intelligence was now updating everyone with new information. However, according to the time of death of the forensic doctor, we found that the 2 women had alibis, so we can basically rule them out as suspects. Another female police officer said at this time, Sir Ma, Sir Zhou, I have compared similar cases in the past 3 years with the information of some fugitive wanted criminals, but I didn't find any similarities. Could it be the first time or the second time? Ma Haud rubbed his eyebrows. The murderer is so meticulous for the first time. Is this murderer a devil? They didn't even know whether the murderer was a man or a woman, their approximate age, height, weight, and so on. They only knew that the murderer was a clean freak. Zhou Yuxing knocked on the table and fell into deep thought. This was the first time Chen Mingming was so close to someone who was working on a case. Being in such an environment, Chen Mingming couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. At this time, Zhou Yuxing was silent and frowning. This was another side of Zhou Yuxing that Chen Mingming had never seen before. In his memory, his father was a person who was often drunk and irritable. Chen Mingming, who hadn't seen his father for many years, unconsciously became absent-minded. So, one day I can really work with my father on a case? He gradually couldn't distinguish between reality and illusion. It was as if the current him was the real him. Everything that had happened before yesterday was just a dream. Is there anything on my face? Feeling Chen Mingming's gaze, Zhou Yuxing couldn't help but be stunned. Captain Zhou was a loud person. His voice soon attracted everyone's attention, and they all looked at him. Chen Mingming was not used to so many eyes at the same time. They were different from the students in the school, and their gazes were also different from the students in the school. Subconsciously, Chen Mingming actually had a trace of panic. Chen Mingming took a deep breath. He had already thought of a response, but when the words reached his mouth, Chen Mingming found that he couldn't say them. The words that almost slipped out of his mouth turned into a single sentence in the end. Nothing. Okay. Zhou Yuxing nodded, then fell into deep thought again. Chen Mingming was briefly stunned before he subconsciously stood up and whispered, "I'm going to the washroom." With that, Chen Mingming quickly left and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. However, he didn't really go to the bathroom. Instead, he came to an empty small balcony on the floor. He subconsciously unbuttoned his collar, and only then did he feel that his breathing became smooth. I actually know how to. Chen Mingming looked at the street outside. The endless flow of traffic mixed with faint voices of people. Chen Mingming quickly calmed down. He soon realized his own problem. Under the different gazes of the students, under the different environment of the classroom, he actually subconsciously chose to hide himself. He instinctively felt restrained, and even had a feeling that he couldn't breathe smoothly. He even felt nervous. Chen Mingming suddenly fell into a trance. Just from this group meeting, Chen Mingming realized a problem. He didn't seem to be as excellent as he thought. What are you thinking about? Suddenly, Chen Mingming felt that his shoulder was patted from behind. This was the voice of his father, Zhou Yuxing. Chen Mingming tried not to panic too much. He shook his head and didn't say anything. Zhou Yuxing smiled and said, "Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You haven't been a policeman for long, and you've encountered such a big case. It's inevitable that you'll be a little nervous." He saw through it? Chen Mingming was stunned. He thought about whether he had exposed any flaws. "Do I look nervous?" Chen Mingming frowned and asked. Zhou Yuxing pointed at his eyes and said, "You don't look nervous, but you're still too inexperienced. What do you think I do? I've seen at least 800 criminals, if not 1,000, I can't hide my eyes." Chen Mingming was silent for a moment, then said slowly, "Maybe." Zhou Yuxing suddenly grabbed Chen Mingming's shoulders with both hands. "Relax, you're the first to graduate from school. You're much better than me. I just gave you some experience, that's all. But you'll have these things too, so you'll definitely be better than me in the future." In his impression, he had never said such words to him. Chen Mingming nodded and suddenly said, "I want to go to the crime scene again." "Crime scene?" Zhou Yuxing was stunned, then nodded and agreed. "Okay, maybe something was missed. You wait, I'll get the car, I'll go with you." The investigation of the crime scene was naturally not only the discovery of the body. In fact, many investigations had been done later, but for those who wanted to solve the case, as long as the case was not solved, the crime scene would be worth investigating. Looking at Zhou Yuxing's back, Chen Mingming smiled bitterly. Investigating a case with his father. This was something he had never thought of. This different feeling made it difficult for Chen Mingming to maintain his usual calmness from the beginning. He suddenly thought of the most suitable adjective to describe his current state: ambitious but incompetent. Okay, you continue to follow Zhao Lu. Once you find the target, inform me immediately. In the office of the administration in the city, Lu Mingho began to eat breakfast after receiving the report from Bu Bugao, while watching the news on the administration's intranet. Brother Hao, I've finished talking with Director Lu. He will arrange the next things. Wei Zidao came back from outside. What are you looking at? Lu Mingho said casually, looking at the news of the Death Network case. Is there any new news? Wei Zidao asked curiously. This case is so mysterious, it's been almost half a year, right? Yes. Lu Mingho nodded. This Death Network case was first discovered about half a year ago. In this half a year, there would be some deaths all over the country. From time to time, such things would happen. The sudden death of a young man addicted to the internet. Generally speaking, this kind of person who was addicted to the virtual world and neglected their own health, or even worked hard in the virtual world for several days and nights, and finally died suddenly, was not uncommon. Basically, when similar situations were found, it would be classified as a natural death. However, as such cases began to increase, it gradually attracted the attention of the administration. They had a special department that would pay attention to all kinds of ordinary cases all the time, because many transcendent crimes were hidden in these seemingly ordinary cases. Finally, when someone found that during this period, more than 70% of the people who died suddenly because of the virtual world were playing the same game, it finally attracted the attention of the administration. The administration began to intervene behind the mysterious case, and soon found an incredible thing. Those who died suddenly because of the game, after they were found dead, their game accounts were still active in the game. Yes, they were active, they could move, chat, and play instance dungeons, not just the accounts that existed as game data. What was more incredible was that these accounts belonged to the deceased, their IP addresses could not be found. It was as if they appeared out of thin air. With the in-depth investigation, the administration even found a lot of people in a coma state. These people basically fell in front of their computers, and the computers were playing the game. At present, there were a lot of people in a coma in the country. Although they were scattered all over the country, and there might only be one inconspicuous case in some places, the number of people in a coma in the whole country became very considerable. Those who were in a coma, their accounts were still active, but suddenly one day these accounts would suddenly disappear. At the same time, the people in a coma would directly die. Finally, the agency named the case Network of Death. It was a supernatural case, and they came to a shocking conclusion. That was, the souls of these people in a coma were very likely to have been sucked into this strange game. During this period, the administration had invested a lot of manpower and material resources to investigate this case. It was only because of the major case that happened in Mount Tai last month that the case temporarily stopped. Now that the Mount Tai case had been settled, the Death Network naturally began to investigate again. Lu Mingho and Wei Zidao were not the people who investigated this case, but they were always paying attention to it. After all, the victims of the Death Network did not have a fixed geographical pattern. Perhaps they would encounter it in the process of handling other cases? It says that in the past half-month, the number of people in a coma has suddenly increased. Lu Mingho frowned. It's increasing at a speed several times faster than before, and it's no longer limited to the game Jade Fantasy. It's getting more serious? Wei Zidao also frowned. As far as he knew, the victims in the beginning were all playing the same game, so the company that produced the game was naturally thoroughly investigated from top to bottom. Originally, the administration had thought of directly shutting down the server of the game company, but they were worried that the souls trapped in the game would be affected, or even directly cause the death of the people in a coma. Therefore, the game had to continue to operate, In fact, the game company had now changed hands and was currently under the strict control of the administration. Yes, the higher-ups are having a headache, Lu Mingho said with a straight face. There is one more thing. Last week, the original game suddenly received an update. However, this update was not developed by the game company itself. It was also not through the game's server. Instead, it was an automatic version update. Our people can't trace the source of the update data at all. Since this update, the number of people in a coma has begun to increase, and it's no longer limited to playing this game, and in this game, many abnormal accounts have inexplicably appeared. It seems that, even overseas, such a situation has begun to appear. Overseas? Wei Zidao subconsciously gasped. Does this mean that the virtual game has become a demon? I don't know. Lu Mingho shook his head, but now the administration plans to send people to play this game, hoping to find a way to enter the game with souls. That's all for now, and there's no more. How many victims are there? Wei Zidao asked subconsciously. According to incomplete statistics, there are already about 80,000 people. Lu Mingho said, and most of them are already dead, and there are about 16,000 or 17,000 people in a coma at present. Wei Zidao smiled bitterly. If this number continues to increase, I'm afraid the administration won't be able to cover it up. 80,000 people seem to be a lot, but if they were scattered all over the country, or even all over the world, it seems so small. But no matter how small it was, if this number continued to increase, it would inevitably attract the attention of the society, and at that time, a simple explanation would not be able to cover up the matter. Yeah. Lu Mingho smiled bitterly. It's really an eventful time. By the way, the equipment I applied for should be delivered in the afternoon. When the time comes, let's see if we can find the location of this 24. You can go and prepare. Okay. In the headquarters of the administration in the distant capital, in a room with dozens of high-end computers, rows after rows of men and women were fighting with all their might, the monsters in the game. Damn it! Is the first floor of the Demon King's castle hell difficulty? Heal me, heal me! The bustling shouts came one after another. This place was the most common internet cafe in the city. Attention, everyone, I have a payment here. Suddenly, in front of one of the computers, a young man pressed the bell next to the table. This instantly attracted everyone's attention, including one of the people in charge of the case. After playing for so long, it finally appeared, the secret behind the game. Agree or disagree? Team leader? Agree. Otherwise, all the previous efforts will be wasted. The young man in front of the computer nodded and then took a deep breath. This was because this was the first time this special interface had appeared, and there was a countdown circle on it. Obviously, it wouldn't stay there forever. He didn't know when it would appear again. Finally, under the instruction of the team leader, the young man directly clicked the agree button. He was naturally very nervous, but in addition to him, there were dozens of agents and logistical support personnel here, and this was the administration's headquarters, which was known to be able to withstand a nuclear bomb. Even if this computer exploded, it would not hurt anyone. However, the moment the young man clicked agree, he directly collapsed onto the table without making a sound. And the account belonging to this young man, at this moment, actually moved automatically, and a line of words appeared in the chat channel. I really have to come in the game. Chapter 12:12. For a moment, Chen Mingming felt that it might be a good thing if the car could slow down a little, or if the destination was a little further away. The father and son chatted in the car. They would discuss things related to the case, talk about things that were not important, or sigh when they passed by a place that had changed. It was a very strange feeling. The father and son were in the same place. It was as if they were playing a detective game together. Of course, this was a real-life investigation, and it was very likely that they would encounter dangers outside the game. Unknowingly, the car stopped. Wang Liang's rental apartment had already been sealed. Without another word, Zhou Yuxing tore open the seal, opened the door, and walked in. Chen Mingming, on the other hand, subconsciously stood outside the door with a thoughtful expression. Zhou Yuxing turned around and asked curiously, "What did you find?" Chen Mingming shook his head subconsciously and walked into the rental house. The body in the freezer had already been moved away, but the freezer hadn't been moved. Everything in the rental house hadn't been touched, and it still looked unusually clean. Zhou Yuxing had been to the scene several times, but he didn't find any new clues. If Chen Mingming hadn't asked to take another look, he probably wouldn't have come again in a short period of time. However, the air in the room was a little stuffy. Zhou Yuxing went straight to the window and opened it. He wasn't afraid that he would ruin the scene. After such a long time, the colleagues in charge of collecting evidence had already collected all the valuable things. According to the colleagues who collected evidence, when they came to the scene, they didn't find any fingerprints at all. The rental house was so clean that it looked like it had been washed inside and out with disinfectant. But this was Chen Mingming's first time here. He frowned and looked at the clean rental house. The first thing he felt was a very comfortable feeling. He felt that the house was in the best condition. Even if they wanted to clean it, they had already cleaned the places that shouldn't be cleaned. Zhou Yuxing knew that there wasn't much value in this place, but that didn't stop him from accompanying Chen Mingming in the investigation. In his opinion, this was a very good thing that could increase Chen Mingming's case experience. He wasn't even in a hurry to ask Chen Mingming. Instead, he waited very patiently. Perhaps subconsciously, as a father, he also hoped that Chen Mingming could give him some unexpected surprises. Chen Mingming suddenly moved. He suddenly opened the shoe cabinet at the door, and under Zhou Yuxing's astonished gaze, he took out some shoes and casually threw them on the ground. Zhou Yuxing was stunned and was about to ask him what he wanted to do. Chen Mingming was no longer satisfied with just rummaging through the shoe cabinet. He began to walk around the house. The sofa, the cupboard, the table, and even the bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. He messed up everything that should have been neat and tidy. Finally, Chen Mingming returned to the entrance. At this time, the whole rental house was in a mess. It was more like a single man's living condition. Although Wang Liang had many girlfriends, they were not living together. According to the investigation, Wang Liang was not a clean freak. The police had once visited the bar where Wang Liang had worked. In the storage compartment that Wang Liang had not cleaned after he regained his senses, they could see that the things inside were a mess. "What do you want to do?" Zhou Yuxing frowned and asked in confusion. After a moment of silence, Chen Mingming said, "I want to simulate the murderer's movements." Simulate? Zhou Yuxing couldn't help but be stunned, then nodded. "Okay, you are a profiler, then give it a try. You imitate the murderer, and I will imitate Wang Liang. However, we don't even know the murderer's killing method." "The time is at night," Chen Mingming said subconsciously. "At night. Late at night is the best time to hide." Chen Mingming muttered, assuming that Wang Liang did not resist at that time. "He's probably asleep or drunk." "Drunk," Zhou Yuxing said. According to the investigation, Wang Liang is a person who is easily sober. He works in a bar. There is a lot of wine in this house. He should have a habit of drinking, and a drunk person is the easiest to kill. As for the place where he slept after getting drunk, seeing that the rental house was so clean, Zhou Yuxing felt that it was the same wherever he slept. He simply lay down on the sofa. "You can start." Chen Mingming nodded, walked out and closed the door. He stood in front of the door, closed his eyes, put his hand on the doorknob, and remained motionless. Suddenly, Chen Mingming opened his eyes and gently pushed the door open. When he entered the house and saw the messy entrance, he frowned. Then, he straightened out the shoes that were messily placed at the entrance and slowly walked into the house. At this time, Zhou Yuxing, who saw Chen Mingming's actions, was stunned at first, then quickly lay down, but he didn't close his eyes. Chen Mingming quickly came to the sofa, but he didn't make a move. The father and son looked at each other. Although Zhou Yuxing was very curious, he didn't disturb them. He knew that the simulation of a case required a certain degree of concentration, especially the person who played the murderer, who was wholeheartedly immersed in the scene. Finally, Chen Mingming made a move. He walked into the kitchen, took out a roll of plastic wrap, then came in front of Zhou Yuxing and slowly put the plastic wrap on Zhou Yuxing's face. Of course, he didn't wrap it firmly. Zhou Yuxing pretended to struggle in pain, then stopped moving. After that, Chen Mingming stopped and didn't move again. After a long time, seeing that Chen Mingming didn't move next, Zhou Yuxing finally couldn't help but remove the plastic wrap on his face, sat up and asked, "What's the problem?" "Something's wrong." Chen Mingming frowned. "What's wrong?" Zhou Yuxing asked in shock. "Oh right, why did you choose plastic wrap and not other murder weapons?" Chen Mingming subconsciously said, "If other murder weapons were used in places like the sofa or bed, it's easy to leave bloodstains. Since the murderer is a person who likes to be clean, then he wouldn't dirty anything unnecessary when he did it. Suffocation should be his first choice. Of course, it could also be poison. But considering that the murderer had cleaned up the rental house so well, it would be wrong to use poison. If it was poison, there was no need for him to clean up the house." "Well, what you said makes sense." Zhou Yuxing nodded. "You haven't told me what's wrong?" "It's not coherent," Chen Mingming muttered. "Dismembering the body doesn't fit the murderer's personality. He chose to suffocate, so there's no need to dismember the body at all. It will only make the place dirtier. Maybe he has a dual personality. Besides being clean, he also has a violent side." Zhou Yuxing analyzed. Chen Mingming said, "Then he should have used a more violent and cruel weapon from the beginning. Anyway, he has to be cleaned up in the end." "Well," Zhou Yuxing couldn't help but ponder. At this time, the phone rang. After Zhou Yuxing picked it up, he quickly nodded. "Okay, I got it." After the phone was hung up, Zhou Yuxing said seriously, "Find out where this freezer was sold from." In the whole rental house, only the freezer used to hide the body was so out of place. Normal people naturally didn't need this kind of thing at home. Besides, there was already a refrigerator in the kitchen in the rental house. Wang Liang obviously didn't need another refrigerator. Then there was only one possibility. The freezer was very likely prepared by the murderer in advance. After thinking about this matter, the police in the criminal police unit couldn't help but feel angry. The murderer brazenly hid the body after dismembering it, and even used Wang Liang's phone and SIM card to create the illusion that Wang Liang was still alive. It was as if he was challenging the police. When he went out, Zhou Yuxing wanted to go to the shop that sold the freezer as soon as possible. He thought that it was very likely that he could find some breakthrough clues about the murderer. But Chen Mingming thought of another thing. The test questions, the information on the sheepskin scroll, and the last sentence written. The key person, Zhao Luo. Subconsciously, Chen Mingming didn't mention this to Zhou Yuxing, because the police had already concluded that Zhao Luo couldn't complete the other murder case. This was an electrical appliance repair department located in the old street. According to the investigation of the freezer, many parts of the internal wiring of the freezer were old. Obviously, it wasn't brand new, but the factory information could be found. They tracked down the original buyer, and found out from the buyer that the freezer was directly sold as a second-hand to an old electrical appliance recycler. Finally, they found out from the recycler that the freezer was sold to this repair department in the end. After arriving, Zhou Yuxing directly showed his ID card in front of the boss, and gave him the photo and model of the freezer. This freezer was indeed sold by us. The boss gave the answer after thinking for a while. Zhou Yuxing's face immediately lit up and he quickly asked, "How do you remember what the person who bought it looked like?" The boss said, "I don't know. That day, a man wearing a mask came to buy something. After he bought it, he wrote an address for us to send it there, and then we didn't contact him." "You didn't enter the house?" Chen Mingming frowned. The boss shook his head and said, We didn't enter the house, we just put it at the door. Speaking of which, it's strange. Almost no one would stop us from putting it at the door. So I remember this quite clearly. Then can you probably remember the characteristics of the man who bought it? Zhou Yuxing continued to ask. The boss shook his head and said, "Ah, sir, this is something that happened a few months ago, how can I remember it so clearly?" Okay. Zhou Yuxing nodded helplessly, but then he arranged for someone to come over and make a jigsaw puzzle for the boss. At least, he wouldn't miss any clues. The father and son didn't have any major breakthroughs here, but looking at the time, the sky was already dark. In the past week, Zhou Yuxing didn't force himself to work like before. Instead, he would go to work on time. He looked at the time and said, "It's already so late, let's go home directly?" Chen Mingming was stunned, then nodded. Go home, go back to Zhou Yuxing's place, not the place where he and his mother lived, right? Chen Mingming couldn't help but have a strange feeling in his heart, but he couldn't say it. Forget it, anyway, he had to complete the assessment these few days, so it seemed more convenient to live with his father for a few days. Originally, the place where Zhou Yuxing lived used to be where he lived. He actually still had the key. At 7:00 in the evening, when Zhou Yuxing returned home and took out the key to open the door, Chen Mingming smelled the aroma of food. He couldn't help but be startled. A woman wearing an apron walked out of the kitchen with vegetables. Chen Mingming was stunned on the spot. This woman was none other than his mother. "You're back. It's time to eat, wash your hands quickly." The woman smiled and said, "It smells so good." Zhou Yuxing was full of smiles. "Mingming, why are you standing still?" The woman looked at Chen Mingming with a puzzled expression. Chen Mingming opened his mouth, then chose to be silent. He chose to walk into the bathroom. He felt that he needed to calm down. Even this relationship between husband and wife was mended? Looking at himself in the mirror, Chen Mingming couldn't help but be a little distracted. When he walked out of the bathroom, his parents were already sitting at the dining table. Zhou Yuxing was burying his head in the rice, and his mother was filling a bowl of soup for him. He sat down subconsciously. At this time, his father and mother were chatting or talking about some trivial matters. Zhou Yuxing probably didn't like these trivial matters, so he casually asked Chen Mingming, "Mingming, I suddenly thought of something. Why do you think the murderer chose to buy an old freezer?" Chen Mingming subconsciously said, "Maybe it's easier to track down a new freezer, or maybe the murderer's finances aren't that good, so he chose this relatively cheap second-hand freezer. Also, regular retail departments usually have surveillance cameras, so the murderer probably didn't want to expose himself." "And I think so too." Zhou Yuxing nodded. "You too. Since you're home, can you stop talking about the case?" His mother was slightly angry and glared at Zhou Yuxing. "Do you still want to eat?" Eat. Of course I'll eat." Zhou Yuxing shrugged and smiled cheekily. His mother rolled her eyes at him, then turned to look at Chen Mingming. "Don't learn from your father's bad habits, okay?" With that, his mother picked up a piece of drumstick for Chen Mingming. Listening to his mother scolding his father, looking at Zhou Yuxing's impatient but not daring to talk back, and then looking at the drumstick in his bowl, Chen Mingming subconsciously touched his cheek. For some reason, it became wet. "Learn to cry. Is this what it means? Son, why are you crying?" His mother was suddenly shocked and flustered. Zhou Yuxing also put down his chopsticks and looked at him with concern. Chen Mingming's lips trembled a few times, and his voice was a bit hoarse. "Nothing. I just feel like I haven't eaten Mom's food for a long time. It's delicious." "Silly child. Yu Yi gave it a new name, red dust." This was the second time Luoqiu tasted this newly made wine. Sitting in front of the bar, holding his chin with one hand and gently shaking the glass in his hand, Luoqiu's eyes gradually became hazy as he watched Chen Mingming go through the assessment. If he hadn't walked to the entrance of the club out of curiosity that day, or if he could push back the time again, if his father hadn't left, would he also have such a day? Going to the case with his father, going home together, sitting at the dining table, watching the figure busily preparing dinner. Would he also have a day when he inadvertently discussed the case with his father during dinner, and then caused his mother to be dissatisfied? Eating such a meal, having such a night. Red dust is like a dream. Chapter 12-13. The first day of the assessment had passed, but there were no major breakthroughs in the case. Chen Mingming woke up as usual. A strange feeling followed, but it gradually became familiar. After all, this was the place he had lived for more than 10 years. There were sounds outside the room. It was the sound of his parents talking to his mother. What happened yesterday was indeed not a dream. He suddenly felt a little greedy for the feeling of this moment. After a while, Zhou Yuxing pushed the door open and came in. "Oh, you're up. I was going to wake you up. Hurry up and eat breakfast. We're going out later." Chen Mingming thought about the case and said, "I might go back later. I want to go to Wang Liang's workplace to take a look." Although there was detailed information on the parchment, Chen Mingming had not been there personally, so it was inevitable that he would miss some of the details. Zhou Yuxing was stunned, then nodded. It was a good thing that his son was so concerned about the case. "Okay, I'll give you an application to go out later." Zhou Yuxing reminded him, "Be careful. Let me know immediately if there's any news." After a simple conversation, Chen Mingming got up and washed up. He and his mother took advantage of the free time to have a simple conversation. Chen Mingming found that his mother had indeed forgotten about going abroad. This seemed to be the state she was in a few years ago. A state where family was the center and career was the secondary. Since his mother and father separated and then divorced, his mother devoted almost all her time to work. She had great achievements in her career, but the fatigue on her face was getting heavier day by day. Chen Mingming had not seen such a hearty smile in a long time. "I forgot to take the key." When they were leaving, his wife sent him and his son to the door and asked casually, "What do you want to eat for dinner?" Zhou Yuxing was sweeter than before. He said that everything was delicious, which made his wife roll her eyes. Chen Mingming directly said 2 favorite dishes, and his mother agreed with a smile. Yesterday was Saturday and today was Sunday. On a day off, there were not many people on the streets in the early morning. Chen Mingming followed the address on the information and found the place where Wang Liang used to work. But the bar was obviously not open. He contacted the bar owner. After a brief explanation, the bar owner had to get up and find an employee to open the door for Chen Mingming. Finally, when it was almost 11 o'clock in the morning, an employee with bloodshot eyes rode his electric scooter to the door of the bar and opened it. Chen Mingming frowned at the sight of the garbage on the ground and the various smells in the air. That employee said awkwardly, "Sir, we usually clean the shop before opening in the afternoon. We work until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, so we are exhausted. I want to take a look at Wang Liang's locker," Chen Mingming said directly. This young man was a waiter in the bar. He was young, about 20 years old. He brought Chen Mingming to Wang Liang's locker in the break room. Then, he leaned against the locker and yawned, looking dispirited. Chen Mingming looked at the things in the cabinet. There was actually nothing here. All the things inside had been taken away. Recalling the information he had investigated, Chen Mingming began to think about the things he wanted to ask. "What's your relationship with Wang Liang?" "They're colleagues." "What's their relationship?" The young man's eyes were drowsy, and he answered casually, "Sir, you've come here several times. You've asked almost everything you want to know. How's his financial situation?" "It doesn't seem to be good. This guy likes to gamble. He owes a lot of gambling debts outside. People often come to collect debts." The young man thought for a while and said, "It's still the same as what I've investigated." Chen Mingming thought for a while, then took out his mobile phone and clicked on the photos. "Have you seen these women?" There were photos of Zhang Xiaoqin and Wu Rong. The others were also related to Wang Liang. "You've asked before. Aren't these Wang Liang's girlfriends?" The young man wiped his face, but speaking of which, although this guy is not good, he's really good at picking up girls. Here, this one, and this one, he often brings them to the bar. The young man pointed at the photos of Wu Rong and another woman. He often brings these two women here. Don't you say anything? Chen Mingming asked curiously. The young man said, What's there to say? It's not a strange thing. As a man, it's fine to have a foot in two boat. It's a matter of being able to pick up a woman. Besides, there's no need for us to offend Wang Liang for irrelevant people. After all, we see each other often. Since he brought them here, we can just greet them as we should. Chen Mingming said, I heard that before Wang Liang resigned, Wu Rong, this woman came to cause a ruckus? The young man nodded, That's right. It was quite a ruckus. That woman was crazy enough. She nearly stabbed him with a knife. In the end, Wang Liang had to beg the entire way there. It took him most of the night before it was resolved. As the saying goes, one who climbs many mountains will eventually encounter a tiger. If you don't have a diamond in your hand, don't take on a porcelain job. Something was bound to happen if you messed around. What happened after that? After that, Wang Liang didn't come to work for a few days. He was gone for about a week. Then, he came back. After a few days, he said he was resigning. Did you see Wu Rong again? Or the other woman Wang Liang brought here? No, I don't think so. The young man thought for a moment and said, There are so many people here at night. The lights are also dim. Even if she came, I might not have noticed her. Chen Mingming remembered the hint on the sheepskin scroll and opened another photo. This man, have you seen him before? No. The young man shook his head. Chen Mingming nodded. After leaving the bar, it was already lunchtime. Chen Mingming sat alone in a public square. He slowly exhaled and kept recalling the young man's words. Suddenly, a huge shadow appeared before Chen Mingming. He raised his head to look. It was a huge brown bear. Of course, it wasn't a real brown bear. It was just a person wearing a prop costume. Under Chen Mingming's astonishment, the brown bear suddenly extended its claws and used force to clamp Chen Mingming's cheeks. From the brown bear's hood came a deep voice, Wah! Disobedient child, I will eat you. What are you doing here? Chen Mingming asked expressionlessly. At this time, the brown bear let go of its hands and took off its hood. It was the library girl, Tara. After taking off the hood, Tara's face was full of sweat. Then, she sat down. Work? Didn't I say I have to work on Saturday and Sunday? I am going to travel during the summer vacation, so I need to save money. Boyfriend, why are you here? Chen Mingming's intuition told him that Tara didn't really have feelings for him. This girl just approached him with kindness. Just walking around. Chen Mingming answered subconsciously. Well, you want to take a good look at this city before going abroad? Tara blinked her eyes. Chen Mingming's lips twitched. Tara didn't have his memories temporarily altered like his parents and the other police officers in the police station. But thinking about it, it seemed to be true. He was just participating in a 5-day assessment. Changing his identity within the police station was already the greatest convenience. It seemed that it was impossible to completely change the trajectory of his life. If it really did that, then was this world the original world, or another world? Chen Mingming always felt like he was looking at a leopard through a tube. If a simple few rounds could make me feel nostalgic, I probably wouldn't have decided to go abroad. Chen Mingming shook his head and said, Well, you are a bit different today. Tara suddenly looked at Chen Mingming seriously. Chen Mingming asked curiously, What's the difference? Tara said seriously, You have something on your mind and you have become more talkative. Chen Mingming was startled. It was true that he had something on his mind, but how could he explain that he became more talkative? And Tala suddenly patted Chen Mingming's head. Your eyes are much brighter and not as cold as before. We haven't seen each other for only a day. Did something good happen to you? Probably. Chen Mingming smiled subconsciously, thinking of the dinner last night. Tara suddenly shouted, Don't move! Chen Mingming was startled. Tara quickly took out her hand from her costume and pressed her finger on Chen Mingming's cheek. I said this smile, don't move. It's not easy, this is the first time I saw you smile. Don't move, please don't move. Tara took out her phone and took a picture of the rare scene that she was talking about. The moment the shutter sounded, Chen Mingming suddenly felt like he was in a dream. Tara looked at her phone with satisfaction. Chen Mingming didn't know where her satisfaction came from, but he felt that her smile was really beautiful. Tara cleared her throat and said seriously, well, to reward you, I will give you a special service. What? Tara smiled slyly and put Chen Mingming on his lap. He covered Chen Mingming's eyes with his hands and said softly, this is the best service. Enjoy it. The moment his eyes were covered, a wave of tiredness hit him. Once again, the feeling of lying on a grassland under the blue sky and white clouds appeared. Chen Mingming was greedy and intoxicated and soon fell asleep. When he woke up again, the girl who was full of energy had left just like the last time. The figure of the brown bear could no longer be seen in the square. Chen Mingming felt full of energy, with an indescribable sense of relaxation. Recalling the investigation in the morning, Chen Mingming called an online taxi. He felt that it was necessary to meet Zhao Lu. When getting on the car, Chen Mingming suddenly remembered that he had sent the pistol to Zhao Lu. But now, he couldn't remember why he sent the pistol. The authority? In the study, Luochio was slightly stunned after turning off the light and shadow. Miss Maid stood in front of the desk and said softly, they should have noticed something long ago, and finally got in this time. Luochio thought for a while and said, tell me about the situation. Yu Yi said, at present they have controlled the game company behind the scenes. But they didn't know that the server of the game company was just a window of the God Master plan. Even without the server of the game company, the game world would still run automatically. Because they didn't know the concept, they didn't even dare to shut down the original server of the game company. Luochio crossed his hands and nodded. After this upgrade, the capacity has increased, and the number of people attracted naturally increased. It seems that the quantitative change has finally led to a qualitative change. Miss Maid said, do you need to reduce the frequency? Luochio shook his head and laughed self-mockingly. No, just follow this progress. With the speed of doing business, if there is no stable source of income, I will lose all my money sooner or later. Miss Maid just smiled. Except for the master, she was the one who knew the boss' economic situation best. Since the sacrifice of those evil souls sold by Su Zijuan, the master had become rich again. At this time, even if the master was in the mood to take another half-year vacation, it would not be a problem. In addition, although the voice of the master was still in the service stage, and it was not the time to collect the money. But according to the current situation, when the money could be collected, it would naturally be a rich income. In this case, let's reduce the impact to the minimum. Miss Maid naturally didn't want to trouble her master too much. I'll change the program again and spread the entrance to the entire world's network. In this way, at least the time of qualitative change can be delayed a little. Based on the world's population of 7 or 8 billion people, there was still a long time before it would cause a panic after it was distributed to all parts of the world. No need. Luochio smiled and said, as long as the entrance of this world is closed temporarily, it will be fine. Master, you mean? Yu Yi was stunned, and then she thought of something and suddenly said, other worlds? Luochio whispered, there should be a world with a similar level of civilization and even the state of the environment. The answer was yes. If this is the case, then we don't need to care about the growth rate anymore. Miss Maid smiled and said, it seems that the standard of the automatic selection can be lowered. But this way, I'm afraid that the main server will start to expand. Since Master injected a huge amount of spiritual essence last time, the original server can't satisfy the self-evolution of the game world anymore. Then use this. Luochio opened his palm at this moment. A diamond-shaped crystal emitted colorful light in the center of the boss's palm. Feeling the special aura emitted by this crystal, Yu Ye's eyes lit up slightly. This is World Fragment. Luoqiu smiled and said, I just bought it from the altar. Okay, now I'm poor again. Miss May didn't care. As long as other world entrances were opened and the world fragments evolved, there would be countless souls entering the game. This kind of investment was a huge profit with little capital. It seems that Taiyinzi really made a great thing by accident. Miss Maid said softly, Master, have you thought about it from the beginning? Luoqiu smiled and said, Don't think that I'm so far-sighted. This is just an idea that slowly formed later. If I didn't experience Yen Wuiue's world, I wouldn't have so many ideas. While explaining, Luoqiu suddenly had another idea in his mind. Every subworld had its own submanager, Alea. All the subworlds were meant to nurture a perfect breeding ground for a perfect world, all under the same system. In that case, what would happen if a self-evolving world outside of this system appeared? Chapter 12:14. Yu Ye's efficiency was not only because of her unimaginable knowledge, but also because of her ability to carry out tasks. In his impression, as long as he fulfilled his wish, this capable servant girl would always take care of things in the shortest time possible. When Luoqiu became the boss on the first day, the first problem he faced was his survival time, but later he found that survival time was not really a problem for him. The previous boss seemed to have left nothing for Luoqiu, but now he realized that Yu Yi was actually the most precious thing he left behind. Looking at the servant girl's back, Luoqiu smiled and waved his hand to turn on the hologram again. But his phone received a message. It was a message from Song Ying. Do you have time to come out? Luoqiu thought for a while and replied, Over there. On the snow-capped peak. In the boundless sea of clouds, the cold wind was howling. This was an extremely bad weather that could freeze people into ice in an instant. But if you ignore the bad weather, you would find that this was a pure white world, a pure land. In the local language, the word Jumo meant goddess. At an altitude of more than 8,000 meters, there should be no trace of people, but there was a figure sitting cross-legged on the snow-capped peak. Long Shiruo wiped her forehead and slowly exhaled a warm breath. The warm breath instantly froze the cold into ice. It's done. Long Shiruo twisted her neck. From the southernmost coastline to the northern prairie, from the eastern coast to the highest peak in the world, in such a short time, Shinryu almost didn't stop for a moment, and finally succeeded in temporarily locking the erupting aura in the area of Kelowna. In this way, the aura in Kelowna is probably getting stronger and stronger day by day. Although Long Shiruo did not want to let the guy outside take advantage of her aura, she was actually not sure whether it was a good idea or not. In such a confined environment, the aura in Kelowna was getting stronger and stronger day by day, which meant that the agency would find more and more newborns with abilities. It was even possible that there would be such a change among ordinary people. The collision between the transcendents and ordinary people would probably come earlier, right? Kelowna Shinryu bitterly smiled, and suddenly felt very tired on the snow-capped peak. She stood there alone and was as tired as a dog, but she couldn't find anyone to talk to. Find someone to share the burden with her? Impossible, there won't be anyone. She looked at the changes in the sea of clouds outside the snow-capped peak. The gathering and dispersing clouds were ethereal and shapeless, as if they had transformed into all things in the world. Then, they gradually converged into a hateful face. The true dragon of the divine prefecture was stunned at this moment, then he gritted his teeth. His eyes seemed to be spitting fire as he punched through the air, breaking the endless sea of clouds. You're already here, and you still won't let me go. But she knew in her heart that what she saw in the clouds was just her subconscious action. After punching, Kelowna Shinryu suddenly became like a deflated balloon, lying on the snowy ground and staring at the blue sky in a daze. That damn profiteer is probably opening his shop again. Long Shiro muttered, I don't know what poor lambs will be slaughtered again. Damn it, did that damn profiteer do anything to Pianxian when I wasn't here? How could she be so careless? This question was instantly magnified in Kelowna Shinryu's mind. No, she had to go back immediately. When Kelowna Shinryu made up her mind to go back immediately, on the other side of the snow-capped peak, several figures climbed up at a very fast speed and soon arrived at the junction. Seeing these figures stop in front of her, Long Shirua couldn't help but frown. These people wore red robes and held tantric magic weapons, murmuring along the way. This world's highest mountain connected Kelowna and another religious country, and these guys in red robes were obviously the monks of the religious country on the other side. Obviously, these monks didn't expect to see a beautiful woman on this vast snowy mountain, because they practiced the Mahayana secret method and Rouge was just a skeleton to them. They didn't care about her appearance. Hello. The leader of the monks spoke not very authentic Kelowna modern Chinese. Do you know why the aura suddenly stopped? Long Shirua tilted her head and looked at these monks, saying indifferently, I don't know. The monks looked at each other, and the monk who spoke first said, Recently, there has been a continuous flow of spirit chi coming from the goddess mountain. We are very happy. Benefactress, if you know why it suddenly stopped, can you tell us? We are very grateful. I said I don't know. Long Shirua frowned. If you don't have time, go back to your nest, and don't come out casually. Look at you, you are ascetics on the other side of the mountain, right? Cultivation is not easy, you should cherish it. The monks frowned, and another one sighed. To be honest, we have been practicing hard for decades, and we haven't made any progress in recent decades. Coincidentally, the aura is radiating, and we seem to have loosened up. This is very important to us, please tell us. Long Shirua sneered, What? This aura came from Kelowna, and now it has stopped, do you want to snatch it? Lady, everything in the world is equal, and the aura is a gift from nature, how can we snatch it? The leader shook his head. Long Shirua said disdainfully, If my family dug a well, would I use it to raise you? The monks frowned, but it was still the leader who said, Female benefactor, we are just inquiring and have no intention of arguing with you. How about this, since female benefactor is unwilling to speak, we will investigate on our own. Another monk said, This goddess mountain seems to be trapped by a layer of seal, which prevents the aura from spreading. As he said that, the magic tool in the monk's hand suddenly turned, and a golden light shot out, directly towards the snowy peak. The true dragon of the divine land had sealed the spirit chi within the boundaries of the land of the divine land. Naturally, it could not use a strong seal everywhere. If one were to divide the spirit chi, one could say that each place was very weak. Seeing that the monk wanted to directly break the seal here, the Kelowna Shinryu, who was in a bad mood, didn't intend to be polite, and directly slapped the monk's golden light, shattering it. Seeing that, the monks weren't angry and instead smiled. It seems that the sudden disappearance of the aura has something to do with you, lady. I am the one who sealed the aura. Long Shirua said indifferently, I can give this aura to whoever I want, it's not up to you to tell me what to do. But if I find out that you dare to freeload, don't blame me for not being polite. What an arrogant lass. Among the monks, a tall man with a fat head, big ears, and a face full of beard coldly snorted at this time. This person had become a monk halfway through his life. Because of his extraordinary talent, he made rapid progress in the cultivation of the secret method. However, the roots of the mortal world had not been completely exhausted. Although the irritable temperament before becoming a monk had faded a lot over the years, it still remained. In addition, the secret technique he cultivated was the path of destruction, and although he was supported by the Mahayana secret technique, he would inadvertently reveal a trace of violent aura. Since this aura is glowing, it is the path of nature. Its appearance will change the concentration of aura in the world, and for cultivators like us who are trapped, it is no less than good news. Noisy! Long Shirua faintly showed a green vein on her forehead, and with a wave of her hand she slapped the monk's face. The fat monk instantly fell to the ground, spitting out blood. The fat monk's ferocity was instantly aroused, and he directly sat on the ground, clasped his hands together, and began to mutter. Behind him, an illusory figure slowly appeared. This shadow had many strange images, including the image of Lin Jia, the image of terror, the image of gentleness, the image of Superman, and the image of three faces. All of a sudden, endless Sanskrit chants sounded on the snowy peak. Noisy! Long Shiro was instantly furious. Not to mention a half-baked monk like you. Even if your Shiva dares to come, I will beat him into a pig's head. Get out of here! A dragon's roar sounded. On the snowy peak, a huge cloud gathered crazily like the center of a hurricane, and in the center, there was a ferocious dragon head condensed by the cloud. At this moment, the dragon head looked down, and it was actually bigger than the entire snowy peak. The Sanskrit chants instantly disappeared, and all the strange images behind the fat monk were directly broken. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and directly fainted on the snowy ground. You are Kelowna Shinryu. The leading monk's expression changed dramatically, and his heart beat wildly as he looked at the huge dragon head on the snowy peak. Get out of here! The leading monk was sweating profusely. None. Kelowna Shinryu, I'm sorry to disturb you, we didn't mean to offend you, please forgive us. As he spoke, he quickly helped the fainted monk up, and it seemed that he was planning to retreat. Long Shiro snorted coldly. Don't let me know that you dare to sneak into my territory and steal my aura, or else I'll kill my way into your kingdom and tear down all your idols from small to big. The monks didn't dare to say anything, so they could only lower their heads and leave bitterly in the wind and snow. Kelowna Shinryu was invincible. This legend was not only limited to Kelowna. Humph! Seeing these monks leave, Long Shiro snorted coldly, and then slowly flew away from the snowy peak. If it wasn't an extreme situation, she wouldn't really go to other people's territory and tear down all their idols. In the inherited memories of the true dragon, the three figures behind the religion of these monks were extremely petty even in the heavenly mythological system. If they really tore down the statues, the other party might descend as a god. When that happened, there would naturally be no lack of trouble. However, she wasn't afraid. If they dared to descend, she would beat them back. It wasn't like she hadn't beaten them before. Damn profiteer, don't let me know that you attacked Agile when I wasn't here. She's just a kid. Come at me if you dare. In the end, she disappeared into the snowy mountains. Soon, the monks returned to the place where they cultivated ascetically. In this polluted world, the aura was scarce. Only in these inaccessible places, there was still a trace of pure aura. From the place where they cultivated, they could see the goddess mountain. It was so close, but it felt like they were in two different worlds. How's Su area? The leading monk sighed in despair. After the aura was cut off, this place was once again in a state of lack of aura. In fact, the aura in this place was not bad, and it was a place that they found after much effort. It was a pity that after experiencing the feeling of endless spiritual energy coming from the goddess mountain, this relatively good place now seemed so unbearable. His injuries are very serious. Another monk shook his head. I'm afraid he won't be able to recover in a short time. If he fully recovers, I'm afraid his 100 years of cultivation will be ruined. I didn't expect Kelowna Shinryu to be so terrifying. With just a wave of her aura, the Mahayana secret technique that we cultivated for 100 years couldn't even withstand a single blow. He couldn't help but feel disheartened. Stupid guy. Suddenly, a deep voice rang out in the cave. The monks were shocked at this moment, and a strong feeling of palpitations made them involuntarily kneel on the ground. The chubby Su area, who was lying on the stone bed, slowly floated up and sat cross-legged in midair. All sorts of strange phenomena appeared on his body, and all sorts of manifestations descended. Sovereign! The monks instantly realized something, and they immediately prostrated themselves on the ground. Please save Sueria. Sueria slowly opened his eyes, which were flashing with colorful light. I already know what happened. Sueria is my believer, and I will naturally save him. Thank you, Sovereign. The monks were overjoyed. Sueria snorted coldly. I'll remember this. This vile dragon only dares to be so arrogant because he has Kelowna as his backer. Sovereign, could it be that even if you personally descend? The monks couldn't help but recall what that Kelowna Shinryu had said. Their faces turned pale, and they asked in terror. If I personally descend, I'll definitely be rejected by the world will, and I won't be able to release all my power. Sueria said calmly. However, to deal with this vile dragon, there's no need for me to personally descend. This vile dragon has no one to rely on, and is nothing to fear. Sovereign? At this moment, Suya slowly closed his palm. When he opened it again, a black bead appeared in his hand. The bead slowly floated to the front of the leading monk. This is? Sueria said indifferently, there's no need to rush to deal with that sinful dragon. This is a lump of my divine will of origin. Plant it in a spirit child and assist the spirit child in spreading my teachings. The monks' faces changed slightly, and they couldn't help but raise their heads. Sueria said slowly. You only need to do as I say. There's no need to ask too much. Yes, the voice stopped and the strange phenomenon in the cave disappeared. Sueria directly fell onto the stone bed. Within the divine kingdom in the void. At this moment, he slowly opened his eyes and muttered to himself. Jehovah and Fention have gone to explore the unknown origin, and have yet to return. This is a good opportunity for me to develop my believers. Jehovah has suppressed my religion in many worlds, and it's time for a change. There must be a great secret in this subworld. Among the countless subworlds, only this place has Kelowna Shinryu, so it must be different. At this moment, in the majestic palace, hundreds of beautiful girls slowly knelt down, and the sound of Sanskrit resounded all around. Its terrifying appearance changed, and it had already turned into the appearance of Lin Jia Yen PS1. Looking through the reward records, I found the cute owner, ZWX98. As usual, she bowed her head to the capitalist boss.